All 5 of the seats were currently filled, but Sam was deeply confused, and it seemed like he wasn't the only one, as the others in the remaining seats also looked over at the remaining person sitting down. Whoever it was not one they were expecting. "What's wrong?" Quinn asked, still a little amazed that there was a good chance an important figure was sitting next to them for a while, without them realizing it. "Well, as you can see, the 5 seats are for the Big 4 family members as well as the Supreme Commander. However, the leader that should be sitting in the last seat is from the Greylash family. The current leader is an older, patient, respected man. This person looks like he just graduated from the military academy." It was true even before, when Quinn had seen him, he felt like the man was in his early 20s. That's why the idea that he held a high position never crossed his mind. "Your information is a little outdated," Vorden said. "I heard that the old man was sick for a long amount of time. There were even rumors that he had already passed away, but for fear of not having a new master, they decided to hide this information from the outside. If my guess is right, they can no longer hide it. The person you're looking at is the new master." What Vorden had said was very plausible in Sam's mind. The question was, Sam, who prided himself in being exceptionally knowledgeable in current world politics, had heard the same rumors. But it seemed Vorden was equally familiar, if not a little more. This strange group of people started to interest him more, and perhaps Quinn wasn't the only person to look out for. Inside the special booth, the room was quiet, and the others continued to look in the direction of the young man. They were waiting for him to say something, but he continued to play with his long hair, twirling it around his finger with his right hand. The others remained patient, hoping he would say something, but one person's head was furiously starting to shake, as he hated to be ignored, and it looked like hot steam was blowing out from his large nostrils. "Rude, are you not going to say something?" Bernie shouted. "You can tell we are all waiting for you unless no one told you how to show respect." Oscar stood up in an attempt to try to defuse the situation. In a way, the military was the bridge between the Big 4 families. It was hard because each power was considered equal, and the same could even be said for them. "I'm assuming the elder passed away then, and you are here to step in?" Oscar asked. The young man finally turned his head, acknowledging the others in the room. He looked at each one carefully with his narrow, piercing eyes. It wasn't an everyday look one would give when looking at someone, and the others felt this as well. It was as if he was analyzing every one of them there. The others, sensing this, felt a little threatened, as if they were about to be attacked at any moment. "And why would you assume I was only a step-in and not the actual new head?" he asked. The large man started to chuckle. "Huh! If the Greylashes were stupid enough to appoint such an arrogant young fool like you, then they must have fallen. In a few years the Greylashes might no longer be a part of the leaders' table." The calm look on the man changed ever so slightly after hearing those words. He was no longer playing with his hair, and instead pulled his fingers apart between his thumb and index finger. In between these 2 fingers a faint blue light could be seen, and if one was to look even closer, little sparks were starting to go off. "Those are fighting words. If you want to test my abilities as the new head, we can put on a special exhibition show for everyone to see right here, right now," the young man said. Bernie, in response, stomped his foot in anger. As it hit the ground floor, flame shot up from his feet. It looked like small wings had appeared before quickly vanishing away into clouds of smoke. "Oh, right at this instant!" The soldiers standing by watching were all frightened of what was to happen. Right now it looked as if 2 of the strongest people on Earth were about to do battle. If they were to try to stop them, they couldn't do a thing. It was also a big reminder to everyone, these people in the room were not friends. If it wasn't for the fact that each of these people had a common enemy, the Dalki, there would still be a civil war between all 5 of them. "Please," Oscar said, "today is an event for the future generation, for the kids to display their skills, not you 2. If you wish to fight, then do it after we get rid of the Dalki." Oscar then walked over to the young man. In all honesty, he too didn't like how the young man was acting. Usually he had a good read of people's strength, but it was nearly impossible to tell, which truly frightened him. "I'm sorry for assuming you were only a stand-in. It was my mistake to say so. I will be the first to welcome the new leader of the Greylash family. Please name," Oscar asked. "Owen Greylash, the new head of the family, the youngest and most powerful head to ever serve." When saying the last line, he looked past Oscar and directly at Bernie. "Well, he's a confident leader, I'll give him that," Mona said. "It's a good trait to have," Jack agreed. When everything calmed down a little, they sat adequately in their seats, and it was time for them to enjoy the event now. The speakers were turned on, and now all of the screens displayed what was happening in the center of the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you had a wonderful day so far. There were many spectacular events, but as usual, we have saved the best till last. The first round of the 3 main events will now begin, and to start it all off, we have the wonderful crafting event. The camera then went on to show the materials of what was on each separate section. As you can see, each participant has been given the same materials. The only thing that is missing is the beast crystal. Once the participants are ready, they must try to figure out with their eyes alone what the best use for the beast crystal would be. Then our wonderful judges will decide which equipment is best. Each of the participants started to appear from underneath the arena and was now entering the ground floor. The participants had a number displayed on their watches, indicating which platform they needed to head off to. "Hey, there's Logan," Quinn said, still looking over the edge. "Number 33. "Oh, you have a friend in this event then. I guess I'll keep an eye on him." Sam tried to squint over the edge where Quinn was looking, but they were too far up to be able to see anything. It just looked like a bunch of ants were down below. Without looking at the screen, there was no way he would be able to see what number any of the participants were wearing. "You have some good eyesight," Sam said. "Oh, thanks," Quinn replied nervously, to which Vorden gently stepped on his foot. It was a reminder to be careful, since they were no longer alone. That's when he realized Fex still hadn't arrived, and decided to send another message just in case. "Now let the tournament begin," the announcer said. Immediately, the students started to work away. The first step was to inspect the crystal. Crystals were quite versatile and could create several different weapons and armor, but certain patterns and shapes seen within the crystal could help decide what one would be best to be turned into. An example, a crystal from a turtle-like beast, would usually best be used to make defensive equipment, perhaps even a shield. It could be turned into a weapon but wouldn't be very useful. If one didn't know what beast it had come from, they would only be able to tell by inspecting the crystal. Once this step was complete, the crystal would need to be melted down to an appropriate temperature, depending on what was to be made. The next step after was deciding on the mold and finally mixing the melted beast core with the required metals. Cheap or expensive metals could be used, but would affect the quality of the result. The rest was down to the forger. Depending on the forger's levels, the quality and strength of the weapon or armor would be decided. Most of the students had already finished inspecting the crystal and had moved on to the melting process. The camera continued to pan around to the many students working away hard. However, the camera eventually reached one student, a short little one who seemed to be just standing there with his eyes closed. It looked as if he was sleeping in the middle of the tournament. "What is Logan doing?" Quinn thought. "Looks like he's asleep if you ask me," a voice said from behind. As the boys turned their heads, they could see Fex standing there. "What took you so long?" Quinn replied. Quite some time had passed since Vorden had sent out his first message. No matter where Fex was, it shouldn't have taken him as long as it did for him to arrive. It wasn't as if the boys were joined by the hip and they couldn't do anything themselves, but it was more like there was nothing else to do. The event was the only thing happening right now. Other than Quinn and them, Fex didn't get along with anyone else being a level 1, so he had no one else to watch the show with either. "Hey, come on, did you miss me that much?" Fex said, looking at Vorden, who had a strange look on his face. He was still wondering about what could have taken him so long. "Look, don't worry, I had something that upset my stomach yesterday and was in the toilet. Trust me, you don't want to go into the boys' toilet by screen 4. I think you can still smell it." Vorden looked at him even stranger now, and even Quinn was starting to feel slightly awkward. And it wasn't the bad jokes. Did vampires even get stomach aches? Vorden thought. By bad meal, is he talking about blood? "So I heard that you guys dealt with the Zack problem all okay, huh? Why don't you tell me about that? What happened with that?" Fex's words, when spoken, were quick and to the point. He wasn't even giving enough time for the others to reply to what he had already said. Fex was acting strange. He usually joked a lot and often, but it felt as if he was trying to force himself this time. Quinn noticed this and a few other strange things straight away. As soon as Fex arrived, he was sweating. Vampires often didn't even sweat from strenuous activity, as they had high amounts of stamina. This was different. This type of sweat was from something else, as if he was scared. The other thing that made Quinn think this was his heartbeat. The stronger a vampire was usually, the less their bodily organs needed to be used. Their heartbeats were able to be slowed, and the amount of blood and oxygen that needed to be carried around their body was lessened. So the fact that Quinn could hear that Fex had a fast heartbeat, he knew something was up. He wasn't in control of his emotions right now. "Calm down, will you?" Fex said to himself in anger, seeing that the others weren't buying his act. "Hey, you said you're friends with number 33, right?" Sam called over. "Well, it looks like he isn't doing too well." Their attention was focused on Fex this whole time that they had forgotten about the competition. When looking at the screen, the camera was once again focused on Logan, and still, he hadn't touched anything. "Well, it looks like he doesn't care about the event then," said Vorden. "You're probably right," Quinn replied. Hearing this, Sam was quite shocked. How could someone waste an opportunity like this on such a grand stage? Not only were the Big Four watching, but so were many factions from all over. A forger was highly sorted after, so even if the one displayed a little bit of skill, they could quickly join a faction and live the rest of their lives peacefully. The two decided to question Fex later. Acting strange wasn't a call of emergency. It couldn't have been something urgent. Otherwise, Fex would have informed them immediately. They both trusted him now after the many times he had helped them out before. The timer continued to go down for the event until eventually the buzzer had sounded, signaling the end of the competition. Using his advanced eyesight, Quinn quickly looked down at all the items that had been made and used his inspection skill. It allowed him to see each item's stats displayed out as a screen hovered above each one. At first, Quinn was doing this individually by looking at an item, but then suddenly a familiar sound was heard. "Inspect skill has risen to level 3. The number of times he had used the skill while looking for Zack, and now during the contest, had helped greatly, and finally it had risen to level 3. When looking at the items, all of them immediately had a screen displaying their stats. There was no longer any need to use the inspect skill on each item individually. Seeing this, he could see the level of equipment made significantly varied. It seemed like they were only given a basic crystal to make an item. Some had chosen to make ranged weapons out of the crystal, some chose regular melee weapons, and a few decided on armor. It just went on to prove how difficult a forger's job was. The fact that not everyone had made the same item meant it wasn't easy to decide what the crystal would be best used for. However, when Quinn looked using his inspection skill, he could quite clearly see. The ranged weapons and armor had an extra description, saying whatever stat the current weapon was at would be halved. Some of the poorer made equipment only allowed an increase of 1 strength. With the 50% stat decrease, it practically meant the weapon was only a little better than using one's fist. The melee weapon was the right choice, giving the user an extra 2 strengths when being used. The perfect melee weapon that could be made from the item was a long sword. Whoever had made a long sword out of the items would give an additional 3 strengths. There were very few long swords that had been made with the crystal. Then finally there was a difference in the quality and skill of the forger. The ones that had made a longsword, each one of them looked quite different from another. Some just had a basic +3 in strength, and there was one with a +4. But in Quinn's eyes, there was a clear winner out of them all. One of the students managed to make a sword with a +3 to the strength stat, but also it had an added weapon skill. The judges have made their decisions. First of all, students who made armor or ranged weapons, you have been knocked out of the competition. After this was said, about half of the contestants had left the stage, while the rest had passed. The weapons were then further inspected by the judges, but nothing was said as they had all passed anyway. Before the next event was to start, organizers interviewed 2 students. The first student was the one that had created the longsword with the added weapon skill. The audience members were a little confused about why he was chosen to be interviewed, as they weren't informed about who had made the best weapon, but Quinn knew why. "Maybe if I don't become a traveler in the future, my skill could be used to become an inspector of beast weapons," Quinn thought. With just a single glance, he was able to tell a lot of information about a weapon. The next student who was to be interviewed was Logan, which came as a surprise to many. "Logan, we just wanted to ask you a question. You were the only student to not make anything out of the materials presented today. Is there any reason for that?" the female asked as she shoved a microphone directly into his face. "I am not a forger but an inventor. I find making weapons quite tedious, to be honest with you. I failed because I don't respect the art of forging. Like others, this was not my stage," Logan replied. From the side, a few of the forgers started to chuckle.
Yeah, right. What a good excuse. More like he doesn't know how to forge a weapon. He would just have been embarrassed with whatever he had made.
The student had said this quite loudly on purpose, trying to embarrass Logan. Logan then grabbed the mic closer to himself and faced the student. I assure you, creating something that would beat the weapon in your hand would only take a few minutes. The interviewer had a huge smile on her face. She loved drama and entertainment, and it was moments like this the crowd loved as well. Very well. Would you like to redeem yourself, Logan? Why don't we allow you to create a weapon now, and a judge can come over and decide? Usually, Logan wouldn't have done something that placed him in the limelight so much. However, he hated it when others said that he couldn't do something when he could. It was as if they were calling him a liar. Very well. Logan walked back up to his section in the arena. All of the equipment was still untouched from before. The event organizers allowed this, as usually there was quite a bit of setup time before events, and they would delay it with useless speeches or question and answer segments. This was far better than any of those. They had planned to give Logan the same amount of time as the other contestants, 30 minutes. However, Logan didn't need it. The forgers were allowed to use their abilities. Many of them had abilities that would help in the forging process, and Logan was no exception. The little spiders that covered his costume in a small suit started to break down and reform. They gathered on his back and then started to sprout out 3 individual arms on each side. When they finally finished forming, it looked like Logan himself was a giant spider. That's kind of cool, I'm not going to lie, Vorden said. The arms went to work, and now with 8 of them, he was able to do multiple things at once. After 5 minutes had passed, he had finished creating a longsword. The crafting speed alone was enough to have the other impressed. They didn't even really care about the quality of the weapon. Still, the judges standing by the side could already tell, while watching Logan make the weapon, that it was one of decent quality. It wasn't the best weapon to be made today, but for the amount of time it had taken, it was better than they had expected. The interview grabbed the longsword created by Logan and the one made by the heckler forger from the crowd. She lifted both in the air and then struck them both against each other as hard as she could. We have a clear winner, she said. As she lifted the sword made by the heckler, the camera zoomed closely on the sword, and there was a reasonably large chip that went in around halfway into the side of the sword. When they turned to look at the one Logan had made, there was but only a small scratch. The crowd cheered in excitement as they saw this. They loved someone who could back up his word. They were far too used to braggers who could never achieve what they said, and it seems like Logan was not one of them. Your friend is a strange one, Sam said. If he could do that all along, then why didn't he? Quinn started to laugh as he looked around at the other two and then Logan down below. We're all a little strange, he replied with a smile. As the crafting event had ended and the judges were discussing what to do with Logan, they had wished for him to continue in the contest, hoping to see his skills once more. However, rules were rules, and they were not able to make an exception. Logan was disqualified and could now return to the others above. Deep underground, it was time for the next set of contestants to prepare themselves. Layla took in a deep breath, for now, it was time for the ranged event. Shortly after hers, it was Peter's turn as well. Vex? Vex! Vex! Can you hear me? Hello? Quinn said, waving his hand in front of Fex's eyes. Snapping out of his daze, Fex soon realized where he was. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking about how amazing Logan was, he replied. Quinn had called out Fex's name several times, and the others had even left the area where they were watching the main event from. They soon realized that Fex's eyes were still glued to the arena floor. They were about to grab some snacks, yet for some reason, he hadn't followed. Hey, seriously, if something's on your mind, you can tell us. You know that, right? Quinn said. I still remember what you said when we were underground on that planet. We're now blood brothers, right? Hearing this from Quinn was meant to cheer him up, but instead, it seemed like it had only made him sadder. Before Fex had arrived and joined the others, he had a very uncomfortable confrontation with the last person he wanted to see. It was his sister, Silver. He knew that his family would send someone after him, perhaps even multiple people, but he had never expected them to send over Silver. His sister was known for upholding the vampire laws no matter what. She was strict and always completed the tasks given to her. The complete opposite of Fex. If it was anyone else, Fex felt like he could have probably convinced them to let him stay, or even run away. But not from Silver. She was far too powerful and would have never let him stay. On the platform where the two had seen each other, she slowly walked towards him, and he was frozen in place. Suddenly, thoughts of the others he had met during his time came into his mind, especially Quinn. If he was going to leave, he wanted the chance to at least say goodbye. When she finally reached where Fex was, she handed him the small silver flask. "This is yours, right?" Silver said. "I found it with a bald teacher. The person seemed quite strong. I thought you might have been dead." Fex looked at the flask, and knowing that the other one he had was still with Quinn, he knew this had to be his. "Oh, it is mine. I thought I'd lost it." "You fool," Silver snapped. "You know how important items like this are. If the family were to find out, then who knows what they would do to you. You've already broken so many rules. Don't go around breaking more and making your punishment worse." Fex didn't know what to say. It was hard to argue back, and he just stood there looking defeated. When Silver saw the sad look in his eyes, she felt a slight pain in her chest. It was true. Silver did care for the vampire rules above everything else. She always completed her mission and was strict with everyone around her. However, Fex didn't realize that she had a soft spot for one person in particular, and that was her little brother. "I'm here to take you back," she said. He looked up at her, now with even more sadness in his eyes. He had spent only a couple of months on Earth, his dream place, and had only spent it at a school. It was the first time he felt like he was doing something different, playing games and joking around with the others. "I know, let's just go," he said. Plodding his feet along as if they weighed 100 pounds, he walked slowly towards her. "I still have some unfinished business here, and I can't just take you and leave in the middle of my duty as a teacher. If I was to leave now without telling them that I am resigning, they would find it suspicious. I shall inform them after the event is over. You may stay until then. Also, during that time, you must clear the memory of those you have gotten close to. We shall alter your files and deal with your disappearance on our end," she explained. The expression started to change on Fex's face once again. He still had a few more days with the others, and now he at least had the chance to say goodbye. "However, we shall meet daily. You will update me on what you are doing and where you are. I can't have you going off and disappearing again," she said. With everything said that she needed to, she started to walk off. "Thank you, big sis," Fex shouted. "You're the best." Although many couldn't see it, it would have been a rare sight for many. A slight smile appeared on her face. Even though Fex could stay for a few days, he now had a lot on his mind. When he thought about it, maybe he was selfish, wanting to say goodbye. The quicker he would leave with his sister, the less chance she had of finding out about Quinn. This was now a big worry on his mind. No matter what, he didn't want his sister to find out about him. Fex still didn't know the truth behind Quinn, but decided to leave it for now. If she were to find out, she would quite possibly insist that Quinn head back with the two of them. Then if they were to find out he had made Peter an illegal, unregistered vampire, it would be hard to stop any punishment he might receive. When Fex had returned to his friends, all these thoughts were filled in his mind. There was also a good chance that now that Silver knew about him, she would be closely watching him, so he didn't run away. Should I warn Quinn about my sister, or will it only make matters worse? As long as his sister didn't find out about Quinn, there was no need to worry about them. However, there was one thing he couldn't stop, and that was Peter taking part in the tournament. The second he started to fight, or she got close to him, she would be able to smell him. No matter what, she would find out about him, and Fex needed a plan. There was one chance he had, and that was when he would meet up with his sister every day. The four boys had finished getting their snacks and drinks, and were just waiting for the next main event to start. This time, rather than watching the match from over the edge, they had decided to find some seats near the big screen. When looking around, they managed to spot someone who had a small crowd around them. "Look, please, I just want to enjoy watching the next event. If you have anything else to ask, please just send me a message later." As Logan spoke these words, he quickly handed over a contact card that contained his email and contact details. He was never really good at interacting with people, and the attention he was getting wasn't enjoyable at all. After a few adverse reactions, people started to understand and break away from him. "You can finally join us then?" Vorden said. The boys introduced Logan to Sam before deciding to have a sit-down together. They quickly discussed the video, and Logan confirmed to Vorden that even if they unblurred the video, it was hard to tell the one in the video was Quinn. With this whole matter settled, it felt like a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. All apart from facts, of course. "So, how do you think Layla will do? Did she look okay?" Quinn asked, concerned for his teammate. "She seemed to be distracted with something else," Logan replied. "When I informed her about your video, her mind was, let's say, busy. To be honest, I'm pretty sure she doesn't care for this tournament like us." Logan couldn't explain why due to Sam being there with them, but the boys knew what he meant. Due to her already being a member of Pure, there was no need for her to try hard. The event was about to start, and the screen displayed the field where it would take part. Compared to before, it looked like the arena was completely transformed. On the screen now, there was what looked like a little makeshift town. The town looked to be partly destroyed and looked more like ruins, but several areas would allow students to use them as vantage points. Vorden was the first one to realize that the place had been built in a particular way for ranged weapons users to take advantage of. "I wonder how they managed to make something so fast," Quinn asked. "Oh, that's simple," Logan replied. "They just had a few Earth users come on stage and make it real quick. I saw them getting ready as I was heading out." The participants of the event entered the stage once more. All the ranged users entered with their beast weapons by their side, while also wearing a strange red chest piece that seemed to cover their entire upper body. Looking at all the participants closely, it was noticed that not a single one of them wore any beast armor or boots. The only different thing was the weapons themselves. It seemed like each participant was also given different types of material to be used. Like, bow users were given all the same arrows, and the same for other weapons as well. The ranged ammunition given to participants was designed to explode on impact and produce a paint-like splatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, all the participants are now ready for the ranged event, so I will quickly explain the rules. Each person has been given a set amount of ammunition to be used for their ranged weapons. There is a safety period of 1 minute, where participants will not be allowed to attack each other and must enter the small makeshift town. If a participant does not follow this rule and chooses to attack, they will be disqualified. The aim is to hit others while not being hit yourselves. If any bit of paint touches the red marking on the participant's chest, a sound will indicate, showing they have been eliminated from the round. Those students must quickly exit the field, and the red chest piece will turn black, showing they are no longer active. After the first 40 students have been eliminated, the round will end. Scattered around and inside the building are several ammunition spots where the players may refill. Now that the rules have been fully explained, let's get this show on the road." The students were randomly split into 4 groups for this event. Each of them was to enter the small makeshift town from the north, south, east, and west entrances. The layout of the town was like a plus sign. There were several buildings and small alleyways, but larger pathways crossed each other in the center. Layla was at the north entrance, and by luck, it seemed like there were a few others that she recognized with her as well. The annoying blonde-haired girl along with the brother and sister pair. Just my luck to be put in the same group with them. She took in several deep breaths for some reason. The nerves were getting to her. Usually she was quite good at calming herself down in these types of situations. Her mother would always tell her that one would only get nervous if they cared about what they were about to do. "Does that mean I care about this lame event?" In truth, she already knew the answer. "I just have to get through the first round. If I can do that, it will prove I could do something on my own, and I'm not just some burden on everyone," Layla said to herself. "Just don't get eliminated. Just don't get eliminated. You can do it, Layla." She carried on repeating these words to herself as if it was some chant. The more she said, the less likely it seemed to become a reality. Although she was going against Pure's wishes, they hadn't even bothered to explain to her what they had planned to do, which had irritated Layla quite a bit. Going against their orders, she would at least like to pass the first round to prove to herself that she can do it, and then she would immediately eliminate herself from the second round with no problem. One more day in the event couldn't hamper their plans too much, and it wasn't like they cared if she didn't. "All right, and let the event begin." The buzzer signaled the start of the event, and students from all 4 entrances had entered the small town. Above the arena, a holographic display of the countdown had begun. Some students had split off immediately from the group and went on to look for their hiding spots, while others already had a few targets in their minds. And Layla had a sneaking suspicion that she had become one of those targets. Right on her back, out of the corner of her eye, she could see the blonde girl and the brother and sister pair. Although this was a singles tournament, it looked like they knew each other beforehand and had decided to team up. While looking around, Layla noticed that this was a tactic that had already been implemented by many. A lot of people were running together in groups rather than alone. Did they decide this beforehand or just now? It was too risky for Layla, and she didn't know anyone else in the competition. All her friends were on the outside, and if she teamed up with people now, how would she know if she could trust them? Hoping her suspicions were not right, Layla decided to stop going along the straight path and bolted in between two buildings down an alleyway. However, just like she had expected, the other three had followed her. Why? Why did you have to target me? What did I do? Is it 'cause I look weak? She said in anger as she gripped her bow. There were now only 15 seconds left on the timer before participants were allowed to hit each other and eliminate them. That's not fair, Quinn shouted at the screen, seeing that Layla had 3 people on her tail. Why are they grouping up on her? Quinn, you should know better than anyone that this world isn't fair, not the way it is right now anyway. It's not against the rules, so let's hope she doesn't take this loss hard, Vorden replied. Look, you can't count her out just yet, Vex said positively. She can still turn this around. Still, both Quinn and Vorden knew the reality. It was 3 against 1, and they were all also higher ability users. The only chance she had was to try to run into another group of people and hope the 2 of them fought it out, allowing one group to eliminate the other. But Layla wasn't even thinking about this tactic. She never thought of trying to use another group to get rid of the one on her trail. She was too focused on trying to figure out how to get rid of them all by herself. If she didn't, she would have felt even more useless. She finally decided to enter a small building and headed straight for the stairs. At least this way, she could face them down the stairway one by one, as it was quite narrow. When she reached the top, she turned around the corner and waited. Beep! The sound of the buzzer had gone off, indicating once again that the students were now allowed to attack. Come on, I need to survive the first round at least, and even if I don't, I'm taking one of you with me. She gently peeked around the corner, but there was no sound, not even footsteps could be heard or shuffling of any kind. Have they given up? She thought. Just to make sure, she fired an arrow and twisted it around the corner with her ability, hoping to hit anyone on the other end of the staircase. Ding! A little bell sound was heard, indicating that a player had been hit. A broad smile appeared on her face. When attempting to move, she looked down at herself and noticed that her red chest piece had turned black. She was the one who had been hit. Hello? A high-pitched voice from the right side said, sounding a little distant. When she looked outside, it seemed like the voice was coming from a glassless window on the other side of the room. She was on the 2nd floor, and if one were to climb up from the side, they would have either made plenty of noise or exposed themselves to the many other students. Yet she had heard nothing. Popping her head outside of the window, she could see the blonde girl being lifted by her other colleagues, with wings on their back. They were flapping back and forth, allowing them to pick up the girl to reach the window. As much as she wanted to shout out in anger at the girl, she couldn't. Layla had lost fair, and she hadn't even put up much of a fight. I'm sorry, Sam said, seeing that one of their friends had been eliminated. Not only that, but she was the very first student to be eliminated as well. Come on, Quinn said. There's no need to watch this anymore. Let's head back to the hotel, and we can try to cheer her up. He had hoped that Layla truly didn't care about the event. However, he felt like even if one didn't care, it would still be pretty embarrassing to be the first one to be eliminated. In the past, she had helped him many times before, and without her, Quinn wouldn't know what his current situation would be like. He wanted to be there for her right now. Being eliminated from the event, Layla left the field and was allowed to head back to her hotel rather than the underground slot. She had made sure to sign out and return the equipment given to her, and proceeded to write her name down on a digital tablet. When she grabbed the pen, she was able to see that she was the first one to have written down her name, confirming she had returned the equipment. Quickly, a digital signature was placed and she walked off heavy-footed. She took the elevator that went directly to the top of the arena. It was a little walk from where she was, since the underground facility looped around and had several places along the way. The elevator from the arena floor allowed one to go straight into the hotel lobby, as they expected some students to want to rest straight away or cool down before doing anything else. The ride up the elevator felt like it was taking forever to reach the top. When she had lost, she didn't know what emotion to feel. She had tried so hard, and the only thing she wanted to do was get past the first round. When finding out she was the first participant to be eliminated, it hit her even harder. "I am useless," she said, as tears started to roll down her cheeks. "Everyone was right. Vorden, Pure, my mother, that girl. They all told me several times that there was no reason for me to be here. Aaron, where are you?" she cried, as the elevator made a ding, indicating it had reached the top floor. She made sure to quickly wipe her tears away with her sleeve, for fear that there might be someone in the hotel lobby that would have spotted her. When the elevator doors opened, Layla took a step forward and was surprised to see a single student standing in the hotel lobby, not too far away from the elevator entrance. The purple hair covering her single eye, and her face could be seen when she turned around. "Sia?" Layla called out. "I've been waiting for you, Agent 100, Sia replied. When her eyes met with Sia's for a brief second, Layla was quite pleased to see someone was waiting for her. When Aaron had disappeared and left them, it felt like she had no one to lean on, no one to confide in. Aaron had been the strong figure that Layla wished she could be, and yet it was something she would never be able to achieve. However, when she disappeared, Layla was a little lost. She had Quinn, but after finding out she was with Pure, their bond was a little broken. There was also the fact that Vorden would constantly get in between the two, and kept trying to fraction that relationship. In the middle of all these events that surrounded her, there was a little ray of hope, and that was Sia. After the last portal expedition, she had seen a scared little side to Sia during that time. She seemed afraid of Quinn and the others, and was confiding in her due to that. Layla, when seeing this, was seeing a version of herself when she looked at Aaron. In a way, it made her believe she needed to become a stronger figure to know that someone was relying on her instead of the other way round. This time, she would be a pillar of support for Sia. That was until the words spoken out of her mouth were like 1,000 knives had been stabbed right in her back. There was a straight look on the young woman's face. Her tone was serious. "I've been waiting for you, Agent 100, Sia greeted. There was now not a doubt in her mind that there were only two groups of people that knew her identity, Pure and Quinn's group. However, what Quinn's group didn't know was her agent number, and her ranking had recently just dropped as well. The fact that Sia knew this confirmed that she was part of Pure herself. "I know you might be shocked, but it was all because of Agent 5, Sia explained. Agent 5. This meant Sia being close to her was all of her mother's doing. Suddenly a realization was coming into her head. From the very beginning, since she had entered the academy, Sia had been her roommate. They had specifically told Layla that she was the only agent that was sent to military base 2. Was everything a lie? Now she didn't know what to believe. Was her new friendship with Sia fake? Was her acting scared an act? What was worse was how much did she already know, and how much were they reporting back to Pure? Her mother hadn't trusted her to even complete a mission like this, so they had to send backup to look after her. When there was a bond of trust, it went both ways, but her whole life it had always been one-sided. She trusted her mother with Pure's true intentions, even though she had so many questions. She trusted her mother when going through the hellish training that she felt was torture. She trusted her mother when she had told her life would be better in the future. Yet, she didn't trust Layla. After everything that had happened so far, something had snapped inside of Layla. Layla walked right past Sia, ignoring her. "Wait, what are you doing, Agent 100? Sia asked, a little shocked by Layla's actions. "Don't call me that! I'm not a number!" she shouted back. "I have a name, and I have a pretty good one." At that moment, the automatic doors to the hotel lobby opened and walked in Quinn and the other boys. They could immediately see her bloodshot red eyes, but had mistaken them for sadness instead of anger. "Are you okay, Layla? What's wrong?" Quinn said as he rushed over, placing his hand on her forehead, checking if she was all okay. "Idiot! Why didn't you come sooner?" she said. "And your hands are cold." At this moment, The full waterworks had come out, as tears of waterfall started to fall, and her head was now lying deep in Quinn's chest. "Hug her, dude," Fex whispered in her ear, while the other two boys pretend to look away and whistle. Not knowing what to do in this type of situation, he listened to Fex's advice and gave a firm hug to Layla as he tried to calm her down. "Quinn," she cried, "I don't want to be useless anymore. I don't." "Layla, when have I ever said you were useless?" Quinn replied. At this point, Vorden had decided to step away, knowing full well he had said that a few times. "You have done nothing but help me from day one," he replied. Seeing the scene, Sia didn't know what to do. She had still not even finished explaining the details of the upcoming plan. Agent 5 had assigned her the task to look over Agent 100. No matter what was to happen, this was her only mission. But right now, she couldn't interrupt this scene. "Layla," she tried calling out. "Go away! Go away!" she screamed. At this point, the others noticed that Sia was standing behind her, and seeing this strange reaction, Vorden started to wonder. He found it strange that Layla had broken down like this over the event. Sure, she would be upset, but was it such a big deal? "Hey, she doesn't like you being here, so just scram," Vorden said. "I can do what the hell I want," Sia snapped back. "You're not my boss, and you're not a teacher," she said as she continued to walk forward. "Just remember, I know about your secret, and yours," she said as she pointed at both Fex and Quinn. Sam, who was currently a bystander at this point, didn't have a clue what was happening and was finding it hard to follow along. "It's like I've been transported into the middle of a soap opera while still in the middle of a season," he thought. Sia walked forward, not caring about anything. However, after a few steps, she suddenly could no longer move. Something seemed to be restricting her movements completely. Then a breath was felt behind her neck. "I would like to see you try to tell anyone about that," Vorden said in a sinister voice. It was the first time she had heard him speak like that. She could see his hand pressed against her throat, with nothing but a chopstick pointed at it. Perhaps others would have laughed, but the deadly aura coming off of his words, she knew it was no laughing matter. Looking ahead, she could see another person who had his hand held out steady, with all his fingers pointed. "Now, why would you choose to threaten us?" Fex said. After hearing the words she spoke, he felt like this was the worst time for anything to be revealed. If the humans had found out what he had transported into, not even his sister Silver would be able to save him. That's why the instant she had moved forward and made the threat, he had activated his strings to hold her in place. At the same time, he immediately saw Vorden and the move, and carefully made sure to allow the strings to not restrict any of his movements. However, Fex soon realized he didn't need to do much, as it seemed like Vorden was able to see and move away from the strings of his own accord. He's a skillful one. At this point, Layla had nearly stopped crying. Quinn still had her held in her hands. She pushed away slightly from his chest and looked up into his eyes. "Quinn, please, I don't want to go back to them," Layla said. "I want you to turn me. I want to stay with you. I want to be stronger." To Sam, it looked like Layla had just made some type of confession. Although it sounded weird based on everything that happened, it was the only thing he could think of. But Quinn very well knew what she meant. She wanted him to turn her as he did with Peter. He was very hesitant, especially after what had taken place with Peter so far. But what happened with him didn't mean the same would happen with everyone. After all, his own life had changed quite a bit, and Layla's was in a troubling situation. He had already figured when she had said she didn't want to go back to them, that being with them was preferable to Pure. Changing her meant she would be leaving Pure and going to his side. Leaving a big organization like that wasn't simple. One would need the power to fight back, and Layla didn't have that. "Very well," Quinn replied. Quinn placed both of his hands on top of Layla's shoulders and moved her off slightly to the side. When Quinn agreed to turn her, she was ecstatic. The sadness surrounding her was lifted. Maybe this was the big change she needed in her life. "Thank you," she said as she sniffled a little bit and rubbed away the last few tears. Of course, right now wasn't the time to change Layla and go through the blood ritual. She was well aware of that. They were in the middle of the event, and there was always the chance the same thing that happened to Peter could happen to her. It was best to wait until they were back at school where Logan could access the black market in case she did turn into a ghoul. "Ladies and gentlemen, the fighting event will soon begin," the speakers announced. The sound of the crowd outside beginning to move was heard. The crowd cheered louder than before, and it could even be heard from the back of the hotel lobby where the group was. This announcement and the reaction made it clear it was the most anticipated event out of the main three. "Nate," Sam said in a rush. "Sorry guys, I gotta go watch my friend. It looks like you guys have things handled here anyway." Although many things were happening in front of him, he hardly knew this group of people and was just helping them out for the time being. What he wanted to do now more than ever was go and support his true friend Nate. "I'll come with you," Logan said, as he was equally concerned about what might happen to Peter, and one of them from Quinn's group needed to inform them of what was happening. The others didn't have to worry about it too much. With Sam, it just looked like some type of strange invitation, and nothing was ever mentioned about Quinn being a vampire or any sort. All that was revealed was that Quinn and Fex had some type of secret. Seeing the level 1 on their wristwatch and how confident they were, he probably guessed it had something to do with the fact that they hid their abilities, yet were in the school based on being weak. This was something he could report to the school if he wanted to, but he saw no reason to. Not being in the same military school, he would have had no benefit from doing such a thing whatsoever, not that he would have even bothered in the first place. The two boys quickly left together and went ahead to the screen 2 areas, while the other 3 were left behind. However, after hearing the announcement, Fex was equally worried and wanted to leave as soon as possible. There was a good chance his sister would be watching the fight. Depending on how close she was to the arena, she would smell out Peter, or there was even the chance of Peter revealing some of his powers, giving him away. The problem was that he was the one holding Sia right now. "You two can go as well," Quinn said. "I can deal with her on my own." Both Vorden and Fex looked at each other from the other side. It was the first time Quinn had requested something like this. He would often ask for their advice in situations like this, so they found it a little strange. Did he already have a plan? "Are you sure?" Vorden asked, still keeping the chopstick he had in his hand, close to Sia's throat. "I'm sure," Quinn said. "Honestly, I haven't given up on Peter yet. I need you two to see if there's any way of saving him, any gaps in their routine if we can ship him off. I know it's unlikely, but even if we can't, at least we can find out what they plan to do to him, so we can get revenge later on." It was the first time they had heard Quinn declare that he had planned to go against the military in the open like this. Saving one's friend from them was different. He was now clearly saying if he couldn't save them at one point, he would punish those that did this. "I like it," Vorden said with a smile. "I agree," Fex said, as he let the strings loosen and returned to him. Vorden quickly ran over, and the other 2 had left the hotel lobby as well. Quinn quickly looked at Layla and just gave a slight nod, indicating she should go off and follow the boys. Before leaving, she whispered something into Quinn's ear. Sia started to look around the room to see if there was any way out. The hotel lobby was quite large, and the area they were in was near the elevators around the corner from the reception. It was a good 20 meters before they could be in sight of anyone. She then looked up at the top right-hand corner, where a camera was present, but she also knew this was useless as well. There was a specific reason why Sia had chosen to meet Layla here. The camera here had been disabled already. In the security room it would just show a loop, and also it was far enough from the reception area where no one could hear or see them. With no choice and the others gone, she felt she could only do one thing. A spirit spear formed in her hand, and she quickly threw it out towards Quinn. Straight after, she tried bolting it towards him, as she wished to run past him and head for the exit, or at least the reception area. Moving to the side, avoiding the first spear, Quinn then went ahead to Sia. Another spear was thrown, and this one hit him directly in the stomach. "Yes," she said, knowing full well that Quinn would have been slowed down, but it was useless. Quinn wasn't even using his full speed. Half a second later, he was already directly in front of her, and he quickly threw out his hand, grasping his fingers tightly around her neck. Even with the debuff, he was now faster than any normal human. As she looked into Quinn's eyes, she could see, for some reason, that there was great anger. When the other 2 had left, she thought the most troublesome ones had gone. Instead, it looked like the worst one was left behind. He knew from the conversation earlier that she was pure, and before Layla had left, she had told him not to worry about the cameras. "What is Pure planning to do?" Quinn asked. "As if
I will tell you,
she croaked out again. Why was it that she seemed to be getting strangled all the time by these psychos, she thought. However, what she was also surprised at was the fact that Quinn knew about Pure. Did Layla tell them everything? How much do they know? When she asked for him to turn her, what does she mean by that? To stay with Quinn, does this mean she's chosen to betray us? I must inform Agent 5 immediately. She started to stretch out her fingers to reach into her back pocket. Inside was a communication device. Maybe she wouldn't be able to talk out in the open, but if she were just able to turn it on, they would know something was up. No reply was a sign that an agent would be in trouble. Quinn's eyes started to glow even redder now, as he had activated the influence skill. You better hope this works this time, otherwise I have no choice but to get rid of you. Sia looked into Quinn's deep red eyes, and her body was frozen in place. She didn't know why. Please work, Quinn said. I don't want to kill again. Again? Sia heard now, fearing for her life. The 4 others had just arrived at Screen 2. They went ahead and sat down in the seats, ready to watch the fighting event. It seemed like there was quite a bit of preparation work to be done, so thankfully, the fights hadn't started yet, and they were busy explaining the rules to the audience. When looking out on the field, 10 slightly raised circular cylinders went up from the floor to as high as the first row of audience members. Keeping their eyes level, they were watching from their seats. This allowed for nearly the perfect view for those sitting there. The flat-top surface of the cylinder would be the fighting platform for the participants. There were a few ways to lose in the fighting tournament. Your opponent would be knocked off the cylinder platform. One was to be knocked out, or the referee, who would also be on the cylinder with them, would declare one of the students a winner. When looking out on all the cylinders, Fex could see his dear sister on one of the platforms. Of course she had to be a referee, he said. Underneath the arena, the contestants were all busy getting ready for the fighting event. The weapons and armor they had hidden until now were all out on full display. On top of this, the participants themselves did not know who they were going up against. Students for this event were also able to use whatever equipment they owned. It didn't matter whether one person had higher gear than the other. It was all about individual strength rather than skill. The focus was to show how they would compete in the real world. Above, there were 10 platforms for there to be 10 fights happening simultaneously at the same time. The fighting event was one of the most significant events, so they needed not to have too much going on at the same time. Their goal was to allow the students to display their powers, and if all the students were to fight at the same time, it would be impossible to keep track of them all. Many factions and important members were watching this event, looking for their next recruits. Before going onto the stage, each of their stage names would be announced, allowing them to know who they were watching and something to remember the students by. All of the students who were in the fighting event were split into groups of 10. This meant on the first day, half of them would be eliminated. Nate continued to look around and eventually spotted Larry. Looks like we won't be facing each other in the first round. That's good. Let me see how much you have improved before I fight you myself, he said. It wasn't set in stone, but Nate was pretty sure that the groups had indicated who would be going out together, and those in the same group would be facing each other. When he looked over to the group to his right, he could see not only Larry, but also the student who had the 2 guards, who had never left his side once, standing at the back. I guess it's worth keeping an eye out on you as well, Nate said, still curious about why they never left his side. We have something important to tell you, the guard whispered in Peter's ear. Don't even think about surrendering or giving up the fight. If you do, you will be paying a visit straight back to the dungeon, and trust me, I can guarantee you don't want to go back there this time. Even with the man's threats, it didn't bother Peter too much. What he was far more concerned about was what they were planning to do. Were they going to just let him have a fair fight with one of the students here? It was clear now, after spending a whole day with the guards. With Quinn and the other's strength, there was no way for them to save him. He wasn't stupid. Whatever they plan to do, I won't let them have it go their way, Peter thought, trying to make it as hard as possible. All right, everyone, Group A, please start to make your way to the platform, a soldier ordered, and the first group, which had both Peter and Larry, started to make their way up to the stage. Nate started to rub his hands together in excitement. He couldn't wait to see what would happen. Inside the underground arena, they also had several screens, which allowed them to see what was going on above. He would have to observe from there. The anticipation of finally meeting the blood evolver was killing him. They had all entered the field as the crowd heavily cheered for them. The noise was so loud that it felt like the whole arena was vibrating slightly. Not everyone was here for recruitment, and it was clear some were here just to enjoy the show that would be put on. "It looks like Peter will be in the first batch," Logan said, watching from the top platform in his seat. "I wonder what they're thinking," Vorden asked. "Rather than worry about what they are thinking, I'm far more concerned with what Peter is thinking. He's a little unpredictable when it comes to situations like these," Logan replied. However, Fex was now sweating heavily. He crossed his arms and nervously tapped his foot away, staring at the screen. He was far more concerned about a bigger problem. Not being able to take it any more, he had left his seat and walked over to the edge to look down at the arena. Seeing Peter on the screen had made him worry even more. "Oh no," Fex thought. The second he looked at his sister, he could tell from the expression on her face. She had discovered Peter. As soon as Peter had entered the arena and started to walk over to the platforms, in an instant she could smell that there was something different among them. Then, when they further split up, she finally had spotted who and where the smell was coming from. "I was meant to be the only one stationed at a military base. There were meant to be no others. Not only that, it's a subclass. Don't tell me." A worrying thought started to go through her head. It was clear that the subclass vampire was illegal. She would have been informed before coming otherwise. There was no doubt about it. The problem was who had created it. Was it her brother? If so, there might no longer be any way for her to save him anymore. After breaking so many rules, he would not get off with a light punishment. For now, unable to do anything in the middle of the tournament, all she could do was keep an eye on the illegal while continuing to judge her fight, since it looked like she wouldn't be judging the battle with the illegal. Underneath the large stone cylinders, 2 students stood on either side. The pillars were spread evenly throughout the arena, allowing the audience to see a fight no matter where they were, but they also had screens that would display the other matches, in case they were interested. Every so often, there were soldiers stationed in the crowd, and this included General Duke. The audience didn't think it was so strange, since it was a fighting tournament, but the reason for the high level of security was something else. "Is everyone ready? During the fight with the student known as Peter, everyone is to keep an eye. They could come out at any second," Duke ordered into his communicator. The soldiers were there in case of an attack from Pure. There were even more soldiers than the audience knew. Several members of the crowd were also disguised. Not knowing the importance of the member they had in question, they were also unclear about how much effort they would make to rescue him. There was also the possibility that they weren't even going to rescue him at all. The 4 leaders and Supreme Commander were here. Any rescue attempt would require their full power, and in all the years before, there had never been an attack on the event. However, there was one thing they were sure about, and that was the fact that they would be watching. Jack, sitting in his booth, was excited. He didn't expect anyone from Pure to come. That's why he wanted to put Peter up for the fight in the first place, so they could brutally see one of their own being beaten to death. By each of the pillars, there was an additional soldier down below. Their job was to catch anyone who would fall off the stage. As the first stage names were announced, the soldier below stomped his foot hard on the ground, and a smaller pillar raised the student onto the fighting platform. This was readily done as each of the students' names was being called. A cheer followed with each name, until eventually they had reached the last platform, Platform 10. The soldier stomped his foot, raising Larry Steele to the stage. "And on stage 10, introducing Octopuncher." Looking at the screen from underground, Nate was slightly confused by the name choice. "So you're not going to reveal your blood evolver in front of everyone, huh? But what kind of lame name is that?" The man then stomped his foot again, and a pillar rose from underneath Peter, allowing him to step onto the platform. "And next we have his opponent, Zombie P." When this name was called, there wasn't much of a reaction from the crowd in the arena. However, the students above and below ground were stunned, and Nate couldn't keep his jaw closed. As Peter's name was revealed to the audience, there seemed to be a strange reaction between a few people, and others started to notice this shift. The VR game that Peter played, Power Fighters, was very popular, and the user Zombie P had become a hot topic amongst players. However, there were a few important things to note. Not everyone who played the game visited the forums. Only those that truly enjoyed the game, like Nate and Sam, were a part of this group. Second of all, the servers that Peter played on were the military servers, meaning the only people who knew about Peter were the military students themselves. Still, the strange reaction caused by the students above started to spread like fire. When one or two would start to talk and murmur, others beside them would ask what was so interesting. "Is he Zombie P?" a student asked. "Maybe he's just a fan? Can someone explain to me who Zombie P is?" "Ah, you don't know. He's quite well known in the VR game Power Fighters." The students were busy sharing information and videos of Zombie P's performance in the game, and soon nearly every student now knew about Zombie P. However, those who were in Dell's class were confused, as the video clearly showed the person in the video had a regenerative ability, while the Peter they knew was an Earth user. Those that knew Peter couldn't believe the connection. It just didn't make any sense. Although Peter's information was being spread between the students, the same couldn't be said for the people in the arena. They had come from outside the military, and even though the game was popular on the outside, they didn't have access to the military servers and knew nothing of the name. This was the same for Jack and the others in the booth as well. While they all had their eyes spread, watching all the participants fighting, Jack was mainly focused and excited about the beatdown that Peter was about to receive. "Wait, you're friends with Zombie P?" Sam asked, shocked by what he had just found out. The others had told him they were mainly watching the fighting tournament because of Peter, but didn't explain much else. They didn't know that this type of reaction was going to happen. The fact that everyone was talking about Peter came as a surprise even to them. "Wait, can somebody please explain to me what is the big deal about Peter being called Zombie P?" Layla asked. "I guess I should explain this one since it's partly my fault," Logan said. "One day when I was busy doing my usual tinkering away at my workbench, Peter had decided to play the game. Unbeknownst to me, he was causing quite a stir in the online world, and had become infamous because of his powerful regenerative abilities." Logan was unable to go into further detail due to Sam being there, but there was quite a difference between Peter's ability in the game and the one out there. The game had managed to copy Peter's unique body structure. Rather than ability, it determined his body was what was causing the extraordinary healing. This was why it allowed him to use his abilities in the game, the same way Quinn could use his as well. But as Quinn was able to use his blood abilities with no drawback, Peter could use his regenerative abilities as well, making him nearly invisible in the game. In real life, this wasn't the case. Peter did have extraordinary healing abilities, but if he was pushed to the edge, he would no longer heal until he was fed. "Let's hope True Dream isn't planning something stupid." Nate nearly exploded into excitement after hearing the user's name. Now he thought he understood why they were heavily guarding him. Noticing his watch's level showing a 1, there must have been something different about this person. Perhaps they didn't want the secret to be revealed. Either way, Nate was beyond excited. He was going to watch a match between two infamous people from the game, the Blood Evolver versus Zombie P. "Ladies and gentlemen, the match will now begin." The buzzer had sounded, and the fight had now started on the 10 platforms. There was quite a mix to the sound of the buzzers going off. Some students charged in immediately, causing fireworks and sparks to fly as they battle, while others patiently circled the ring, waiting for the right chance to attack. Most of the attention was focused on the flashier matches, and didn't pay attention to much else. Silver, who was one of the referees of another match, had her mind focused somewhere else. "I need to get this match over and done with as soon as possible." The two students she was watching were both female, and the two of them continued to circle each other, waiting for one of them to attack. "Come on," Silver thought. At last, one of the female students swirled her hands around and blasted a hydro pump full of water. A strong stream of water came out from the palm of her hand and was heading straight for the other student. The distance was great between the two, and the other contestant was not worried about an attack like this. She would easily be able to avoid it. But then she noticed Silver walking around the edge of the ring. This was fine. As a ref, one needed to reposition themselves to stop the fight at any moment, just like a boxing match. For a second, though, the two of their eyes met. The stress was now heading towards her. "Huh, what's this? I can't move." The student was shocked. She screamed at her body to jump out of the way, but it just wasn't listening to her for some reason. "Am I that nervous?" she thought. But it was now too late. The powerful stream of water had hit her right in the chest, causing her to be lifted off her feet, and sent her flying through the air. She was now off the platform and was falling below, but soon she felt her back hit against the solid ground. "Ah, I'm alive," she said, feeling her heart beating rapidly. When she stood up, she noticed she was on a makeshift pillar that was slowly descending back into the ground. The Earth soldier below had raised a new platform as soon as he saw her fall off the platform. "We have our first winner," the announcer said. The female student was upset and was still confused about what had happened, but she was only a first-year student and put it down to the fact she must have been more nervous than she thought. "Finally, now I can focus," Silver said. During the fight, when the student's eyes had met with hers, she had activated her daze power, freezing her for a moment. Her goal was to end the fight as quickly as possible, and it seemed to work. Now she could freely watch the illegals battle. That was a little strange," Owen said, sitting inside the booth still playing with his long hair. "Did you notice something?" Oscar, the Supreme Commander, asked. "You didn't? It must have been my imagination then," he replied. "It's quite hard to focus on one fight in particular when so many are going on," Mona Bree said. Many of them had already chosen to form the initial inspection, which they wanted to watch. From a glance at the equipment, it was usually easy to tell which students were stronger. Good equipment indicated they were strong enough to slay that beast in the first place. However, this wasn't always the case, as some received more support from their family members than others. On the other hand, Owen was only interested in one person, and that was Silver, and this was the reason he had paid attention to their fight. While Jack had his pure attention focused on one fight, it looked like something interesting was going on that particular platform. When the fight had started, Larry immediately had gotten into a fighting stance. He had his gauntlets and full beast gear on. Everything seemed to be at the intermediate level, and looking at him reminded him a little bit of Quinn. Although as soon as he got in a wide fighting stance, that changed, as Quinn usually fought more freely, adapting as he went along. Larry waited and waited for Peter to do something until eventually Peter raised his hand in the air. "I forfeit from the match," he said. Peter didn't care about this match, and fighting meant there was a chance to reveal himself and Quinn. Originally, he wanted to fight, but thought this was for the best, even if he was to die. The words had been spoken loud and clear, and Peter even raised his hand to signal this to the ref. Even so, the ref stood there in silence. It was as if he had never even heard the words in the first place. "I said I forfeit!" Peter shouted. There were no mics on the students, and the platforms, along with the noise from the crowd, were far too loud and far for anybody to hear. Seeing this, Jack started to giggle inwardly to himself. "You think you can just give up? No. No matter what you do, you can't run away from this fight. The whole audience and that disgusting organization of yours are going to see you be beaten till you can no longer move in front of everyone." The other matches ended much earlier than anticipated. The participants were rapidly being announced as winners. This was half expected from the first group, as they were all composed of first-year students. The event was set up this way, so the stronger first-year students would proceed and have a better chance of fighting against the second-year students in the later rounds. Between the first-year students, there was quite an immense power and skill gap. This gap would mostly be the case on the first day, as the weaker students were thinned out. This way, the fights that were to be shown later on through the week wouldn't be so quick to end. The fighting event seemed to be drawing to a close, as there were only 3 platforms with fights still going on, one of these being Peter's. "So this is your grand plan? A setup?" Peter thought. The tournament had to be rigged from the beginning. The judge not replying was an indicator he was working for Jack, and his job was to make it, so Peter was unable to surrender or forfeit, no matter what. "Is the student working for Jack as well?" It was now hard for Peter to tell who was working for Jack and who wasn't. If he was able to set it up so, all of these things felt there was a good chance the student, the ref, and the soldier below who was meant to catch him were in on the whole plan as well. "There is another way?" Peter said as he looked at the edge of the arena. But if his suspicions were correct and the man below also worked for Jack, there was no way the man would try to catch him. From this height, his legs would shatter and would have to be regenerated on the spot, revealing his powers. If his powers were going to be revealed one way or another, he would rather have done it fighting instead. Larry was tired of waiting and finally decided to charge in. As he rushed forward, he made a loud war cry and banged his two gauntlets fists together. If he could, Peter would have liked to win this fight without showing his regeneration abilities. He needed to be careful and figure out just what his opponent's ability was, especially since he was a level 6 ability user. Making sure not to stay too close to the edge, Peter decided to also come forward. Larry had beast gear on that was also enhancing his speed, while Peter wore nothing. Still, he managed to match his speed, and the two of them met dead straight in the center. A fist was thrown, and Peter moved his head out of the way, avoiding it by a few inches as the strike went past his face. The attack was powerful, and the air around it had caused his hair to move. From Larry's other hand, a wide swing was thrown. This time Peter responded by duking underneath it. "Your friend is good at dodging at least," Sam said. From his experience, although those blows looked wild, they still came out at a good speed and with full commitment. It was clear with the first few punches that Larry was not the blood evolver. There was no finesse in the punches, just raw power. Still, if the blows connected, it was also clear they would do quite a bit of damage. Fex continued to watch the fight nervously. If he was right in guessing that Peter was created by Quinn and Peter was a white, it meant Peter, in terms of stats, was just as good as Quinn. The longer the fight went on, the more chances Silver found out, if she didn't know already. After dodging a few more punches, Peter was still wondering just when Larry was going to use his ability. He didn't want to make the first move until he had uncovered this secret. Another 2 swings from the side came one after another, but then suddenly Peter felt something grab him around the waist, and then something else held him tightly around the legs. Looking down, he could see what had latched onto him. A set of arms had grabbed him by the legs, and another set by his biceps, while the other 2 were where they should have been in the usual place. Right now, all the other fights had finished, as it took a while before Peter's officially got going, which meant all screens were on him, and everyone could see him being lifted in the air by 4 arms. "Ha ha, this is perfect," Jack said. "What perfect timing for everyone to see what is about to happen." The others in the room thought Jack was a little too happy watching the students fight. Apart from Oscar, the others never really got on well with Jack in the first place. Looking down at the arms, Peter remained calm as usual. He no longer feared death. Maybe this was because he was already dead. He then started to look at the arms closely and started to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Suddenly, Peter began to chuckle to himself. "What's so funny?" Larry said, annoyed, and also a little concerned when he felt like he had his opponent trapped. Most of the beast gear that he had on had a unique trait to enhance one's strength. This was perfect for Larry and his ability to grow extra limbs, which meant he had more power than the average person in each of his arms. "I never knew I was fighting with an idiot. Was your name Octopuncher? Shouldn't you have 8 arms and not 6? Peter asked. For a moment, Larry stood there still, and soon he began to realize his mistake. His cheeks started to turn bright red, and his face felt hot. He didn't have a stage name before coming today, and when they had asked him, he thought of the best thing he could come up with at the time. "Arr!" he screamed. "I'll kill you!" Continuing to hold Peter in place with his other arms, he pulled back both his fists and punched Peter directly in the ribs. A cracking sound was heard, and the bones moving and fracturing could be felt in Larry's knuckles. Peter's body reacted to the attack, and the expression on his face changed as the air was punched out of him, but no screams were heard and no pain was felt. However, Larry was too angry to even realize this and continued to punch Peter repeatedly. After breaking his ribs, he went on to move his body around and hit his forearms, and lifted him to beat his legs. The whole audience was able to see the one-sided match on the screen. "This is not the blood evolver," Nate said, disappointed, as he clicked his tongue and looked away from the screen. The man he was watching was nothing more than a wild beast. The others continued to watch and were wondering why the referee hadn't stopped the match yet. They could see him standing there clearly, watching such a one-sided fight, but did nothing to interfere. Some of the other referees had decided to stop fights before it had even gotten to this stage. In the end, it was up to the ref in the ring to determine when to stop the fight. They had information the others didn't know, such as student abilities, in case it was all part of the plan. "Don't you think the match should be stopped soon?" Layla asked. If you were to ask me, I think that ref is a little dirty, Vorden replied. Finally, the punching rampage had stopped, and he allowed Peter to fall to the ground, retracting his arms back into his body. When Peter fell, the bones in his shins were now shattered. There was no attempt to lift himself, as he couldn't even stand up. He just laid there, having fallen to the ground. At this point, Larry was already walking away. The match is over, Larry said to the ref. Although many in the arena thought the match was over, including the ones in the booth. The opinions of many of the students were different, including Sam. Well, if he's the real Zombie P, then the match has only just begun, said Sam. It had only been a short time, less than a minute had passed, and Peter's legs had already healed. He stood up from the floor slowly as his arms and ribs were still under repair. His body was twisting and turning in positions impossible if one's bones weren't broken, and everything slowly started coming back into place. Finally, Peter was once again back to his usual self. Well, it turns out one person didn't disappoint me, said Nate. You are the real Zombie P. Peter moved his neck from side to side, making sure everything worked as normal. Well, now my ability was revealed to everyone anyway, Peter said. If Peter was to allow himself to take another beating like that, then after regenerating once more, there was a high chance he would need to eat human flesh again. Although they knew this secret of his, they didn't know the whole part, and eating flesh was a bigger problem than the first one. Now his secret was out, he had no choice. He needed to fight back, to not give out any other information to them. I like it better this way, he said with a smile. Everyone in the arena now thought they understood why the ref hadn't stepped in. It must have been due to the knowledge he had known beforehand. The ref must have known that the student had a powerful regeneration ability. But the truth of the matter was that the ref was just as shocked as everyone else. He had been informed beforehand that the student had a transformation ability. The audience members were too far away, and the screen never focused long enough for them to tell what level Peter's wristwatch had shown. They all just knew he must have had a powerful regeneration ability, and now it made sense why they had allowed him to fight in the tournament. However, the participants knew differently, having seen not only his level, but the number of guards that were always around him. Is he some type of mutant, they thought? Now as for Jack, who was sitting in the booth, he wasn't upset by this sudden change and surprise. Instead, he was excited but at the same time concerned, since he was thinking along the same lines as the students. He had gotten so excited that he stood up from his seat. This has to be the doing of Pure, he thought. Duke had already confirmed he had a transformation ability, and before that, there had been reports of him having an Earth ability. Have Pure finally managed to create a monster? For years, organizations and different research institutes had dabbled in the possibility of allowing a student to have more than one ability. Due to the human cell's structure, it seemed impossible, but they progressed onward. To Jack, it seemed like Pure must have been able to finally succeed in creating a body that was able to have more than one ability. He might even be more important to them than I first thought. Knowing this new piece of information, Jack was determined to continue his plan of luring out Pure. He was unsure whether or not they had made more people like Peter, but even if they hadn't, they would hate the idea of the military getting their hands on something they had yet to discover. You hypocritical bastards, he thought as he sat back down in his seat. The crowd continued to cheer away, and now the students were keeping a closer eye on the match than before. Did I miss much? A voice from behind Layla said. Quinn? She replied. It looked like Quinn had returned and was in one piece, which meant he must have dealt with the problem. Layla gulped when she thought of the possibility of getting rid of that problem. So, what happened? Is Sia? She couldn't finish her sentence for fear of the answer she would hear back. She's alive, but it's complicated, he replied. Pulling off Layla to one side, he decided it was best to explain the full details of what had happened as soon as possible, especially since this involved her. Back at the hotel lobby place, around the corner where the elevators were located, Quinn was alone with Sia. When Quinn had activated his influence skill, her eyes had hollowed out, and it looked like his skill had worked. Before it looked like it had nearly worked, and now, with his charm points increased, it seemed to just be enough to push her over the edge. Not wanting to waste this golden opportunity, Quinn decided it would be best to ask her some simple questions. He had tried asking her what Pure was planning to do at the event, However, he quickly realized that for some reason, any question that was about Pure would be answered with nothing. It was almost scary even to him. Every time he would ask them a question, she would try and search her pocket like an automatic response. Usually, when one was under influence, they would be unable to control anything. There were two things that Quinn could think of as to how this was possible. Either his influence skill was barely working on her, and she was still fighting back, or there was some even stronger type of mind control going on at Pure behind the scenes. Seeing that she repeatedly tried to reach into her pockets, Quinn decided to reach in and grab whatever she was trying to get. Inside one of the pockets, he had discovered a white pill. What its use was for, he did not know. Inside the back pocket, there seemed to be a small white little remote. Afraid it might have been a recorder or something else, Quinn had crushed it to pieces on the spot. It would have been nice to give it to Logan, but he couldn't take any chances, and Layla had also informed him of Sia having something like this beforehand. If he was to find such a thing, he was told to destroy it on the spot. Since Quinn was unable to answer any questions, he feared that perhaps the next part wouldn't have worked either. This was the tricky part. How much did Sia know? Being an agent of Pure, she always had kept an eye on Layla and had been with her from the beginning. If he was only to remove the events from today and the Orange Portal expedition, there was a chance that Pure would be able to fit multiple pieces of the puzzle together. He couldn't risk it. There was only one thing he could do. Erase everything. He only said 2 words, unsure of what it might have done. He had asked the system beforehand, and he said she would be able to live and talk, so it should be okay, but whether or not she could live a normal life again, he did not know. Removing this much information was considered dangerous. After giving the command, her eyes whitened even further, and then the reflection of red was seen. This was the sign that his command had worked. Not wanting to be there when she came to, Quinn decided to quickly head back out to the others. He turned to look back at her one time before deciding to head off again. A short time had passed, and Sia, who was on the floor, had come to. She lifted herself off the floor with a banging pain in her head. She placed her hand, making sure she wasn't injured, and started looking around at her surroundings. "What is this place?" she asked. Then something had hit her even worse. "Who am I? What's my name?" Sia couldn't remember anything, not her birth date, not how old she was, or even the fact she was attending military school. The only thing she could remember was how to speak and her normal bodily functions. Realizing this, a natural reaction had occurred as she broke down in tears and screamed out. After hearing everything Quinn had to say, for some reason she felt bad for Sia. She hated Pure, but not Sia herself. Still, she knew it had to be done. Getting rid of her memories would be better than death. At least, that's what she thought. "So, do you know what this pill is?" Quinn asked as he handed it over. "All agents carry one with them. It's poison," Layla explained. "If we were ever caught, and in a situation where we think we might be exposed, we're meant to take it instantly." "That's kind of messed up," Quinn let slip, forgetting for a second that Layla was a part of this messed-up organization. "Anyway, do you know what they're planning or what will happen now?" Layla shook her head in response. "I have no clue. My rank in the organization was never high enough, and it seems like they opted to tell me nothing now. My guess is as good as yours." With everything explained, Layla and Quinn decided to return to the rest of the group. They quickly updated Quinn on the events of the fight so far, and he only had one thing he could say in response. "It looks like there's nothing we can do right now apart from one thing." Quinn walked up to the ledge and looked down at the fighting platforms below. He lifted both his hands by his mouth and made a cone shape. Taking in a large deep breath as loud as he could, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Kick his arse until he can no longer walk!" It was long distance, and even though his voice was projected very loud, the audience was unable to hear him. But that wasn't important. Quinn only needed one person to hear his words. Walking towards Larry slowly, Peter raised his hand and gave a thumbs up in Quinn's direction. "Now I have permission." After watching the fast-paced regeneration of the student, Silver pretty much confirmed her suspicions. The student that was known as Peter was a white. There weren't many things out there with such a fast healing speed. The only other thing that had a similar healing speed was Wendigos, but it was clear that Peter had kept most of his human appearance, so it ruled that possibility out. Now that there weren't as many fights going on, she concentrated and found that there was no heartbeat. All these things led to the conclusion that he was a white. This could be a little troublesome or fairly easy to deal with. If the white was created by Fex, then it would be impossible for her or him to kill it, and she would have to find some other way to get rid of it. There was no way she could leave now knowing what was out and about. Without a ladder, they could quickly go out of control. If it wasn't created by Fex, then that could be worse. If possible, she would have liked Fex to deal with the situation, as he was able to move about more freely among the students than she could. But if it was created by someone else, and the vampire turned out to be quite powerful, it might be too much for him to handle, and she would, in the end, personally have to deal with it. Whatever the case was, she would keep a close eye on observing the white's strength. There was no longer any need for Peter to hold back. The military already thought he was strange after finding out he had several abilities. The worst thing that could happen was that he would need to feed again, and that was the worst outcome. Knowing this and having the element of surprise, Peter continued to walk forward slowly. For some reason, Larry didn't know why, but he felt an immense amount of pressure. It wasn't the fact that Peter was giving out such a feeling. It was because someone who he was sure he had already defeated was now walking perfectly fine. This type of situation messes with one's head, and it didn't quite make sense to Larry. "I beat you up once, I can just do it again," Larry shouted as he tried to psych himself up to go in for the attack. Shouting out a war cry once again, this time the forehands had come out of his back before charging in. The boots on his feet slightly went a bronze color as he activated the equipment, allowing him to move slightly faster. Then, planning to do the same thing as last time, the gauntlets were activated as well. "I'm not taking any chances, I'm taking you down in one blow." Surprisingly, Larry was moving a lot faster than Peter had suspected, but it still wasn't fast enough. Knowing full well he needed to avoid the attacks, at the right time as Larry went for the grab, Peter jumped back, allowing himself to be just out of reach of the grab. With a dash, Peter tried to go around the side, but Larry wasn't going to let him get behind him. One hand retracted from his left side and popped out of the right side, swinging his fist out at the same time. Peter, seeing this, threw a fist of his own, but he wasn't holding back. "You idiot! Maybe you can heal, but you can't match my power," Larry thought. The two fists collided, and to his surprise, their strength was now equal. One fist didn't push back the other, but the power was so strong that the bones in both of their fists were completely shattered. "Ah!" Larry winced in pain and slightly flinched, while Peter hadn't stopped moving. The pain had no effect, and by the time he was around the back of Larry, his fist had already finished healing. "He's so fast! Are you sure he doesn't have the ability of speed as well? How come someone moved that quick?" Sam thought, watching from above. Fex looked over at Quinn and thought back to when he had fought against the king-tier beast. That's his speed, and with the boots, Quinn was even faster than that. If people saw Quinn fight in this event, how would they react to it? "This boy is good," Owen said. "Ignoring the things he's displaying for now, he knows how to use his unique traits to his advantage." At this point, Jack was grinding his teeth. He never expected Peter to be this skillful. He was happy at first when he found out he had the regenerative ability as well as the transformation ability, but this was unexpected. The aim was for him to lose the fight. Larry spun his body around, hoping to slam his gauntlet fist right into Peter's head. With the added strength of the gauntlets, his power should have overpowered Peter's. Seeing this, Peter didn't care to dodge, but instead lifted his left arm right up to his head, while throwing out a punch of his own. In a fight, the best time to throw a punch is when your opponent is throwing a punch of their own. A counterpunch, Nate said, looking at the screen already knowing the outcome of the fight. Larry's fist had hit Peter's arm and had shattered his forearm, but the blow was blocked. In contrast, Peter's strike had all his power behind it, as well as the momentum of Larry's spinning and coming towards him. As Peter's fist dug into his face, it had twice the power of what a punch from Peter would usually have. Parts of teeth went flying out of his mouth, and blood started to gush from his nose. As his head was flung back, the whites of his eyes could be seen, and the loud sound of the heavy body hitting the floor was heard. The ref rushed to the body on the floor and soon raised his hand. "The winner, Zombie P!" The single punch from Peter was all it took. Larry had been defeated. Slamming his fist down on his chair, Jack stood up from his seat and stormed off out of the room. What's wrong with him? Did he have a bet on the other kid to win? Mona asked. Don't be silly, Oscar replied. You know we don't allow those types of things. I believe he had been paying close attention to Larry for a while now and was planning to invite him into his family. This might have been quite a shock to him. Just leave him be. Outside of the booth, Jack continued to walk down the hallway. He was doing his best to calm down. Pure hadn't come out, and he had spent a lot of time preparing everything, and it seemed to be all a waste of time. Sure, he could still get his revenge just by reporting Peter or killing him in secret, but that wasn't good enough for Jack. He still remembered the embarrassment he received last time when they had taken both the students right in front of his very eyes. You think you can make a fool out of me? He shouted. We'll see that the fighting event isn't over yet. You think your little experiment is strong, huh? Well then, let's see how well it does against a real opponent. When his voice could be heard back at the booth, Jack started to laugh hysterically down the long corridor. Some people in this world shouldn't have the power they have, Owen said out loud and clearly, making sure everyone had heard what he had said in the booth. Does that include you? Bernie asked. Owen shrugged his shoulders. Who knows? The event had come to a close for the day, and there were several surprises. The audience was excited to return to see everything tomorrow, and the students, who hadn't taken part in anything, were restless. When they had all returned to the competitors' room, they were eager to go out on the platform for the evening to expend all the energy they had pent up. Quinn and his group had decided to meet up at one of the coffee stalls. It was a little bit late for coffee, but they wanted to discuss the possibilities that might happen to Peter, as well as update everyone about what had happened so far with Sia. They hadn't invited Sam this time, so they could talk freely, but did, however, plan to meet him tomorrow to watch the rest of the events. Quinn was the last one to arrive at the coffee shop, and sitting outside was Logan, Layla, and Vorden. As he walked up and took a seat, he noticed one was empty. Huh? Where's Fex? He said he wasn't feeling well tonight and would join us a little later, Vorden replied. The truth was, Fex had a prior appointment tonight. On the very top of Hotel 4, if one was to look closely, they still wouldn't be able to see anything, but perhaps if one had a pair of binoculars, they would be able to see two figures. It was windy up at the top, but it was away from the eyes of any type of camera and was in a place that would have been hard to reach for many. Let me ask you something, dear brother, Silver said in a sarcastic tone. Did you know about the illegal? After the fighting event had ended, the participants had been taken to the medical office to have their wounds taken care of. Even those who hadn't received any major injuries still needed to have a quick checkup done to them. For once, Haley was pleased that she wasn't one of the only doctors in the whole place, and it seemed like the rest had everything handled. She felt like it was one of the most leisurely days in her life, but perhaps she had said that too soon. In the middle of checking up on all the students, she had been called over to check up on one of the students from their military base. However, it wasn't one of the students who had taken part in the fighting tournament, as she had first thought. When she entered the hospital-like room and turned around the corner, she was surprised to see a short-haired, purple female student. We don't know what's wrong with her, one of the nurses said as they took Haley around the corner. It seemed like she can't remember anything, her name, where she's from, what day it is. She's in a major shock and we don't know what to do. That's why we decided to call you over. After being updated about the situation by the nurse, Haley knew this wasn't going to be an easy one. For some reason, it seemed stranger events than usual were happening this year. The female nurse had left the room to leave Haley alone with the student, while she carried on to perform her other duties. As she left the room, she bumped into a man wearing the same type of scrubs as her. It was a male nurse. Is everything okay there? The man asked. The female nurse then looked around to see if there was anyone else down the hallway before spilling the student's details. The man looked concerned after hearing the information and wished her a speedy recovery. The man continued to walk down the hallway and placed his hand by his ear. This is Agent 66. I have an update on the situation. Inside the pure metallic base, Agent 5 was sitting at her desk in quite a small spaced room. She continued to twiddle her fingers on the table as she thought about what to do. She finally stood up from her seat and opened up a digital display with all sorts of photos and numbers on the screen. As she moved her hand slightly above the pictures and words, they would move with it. Agent 100 is no longer answering her communicator. According to Agent 66, she did as asked and dropped out of the first-round tournament, but due to the events surrounding Agent 72, we no longer know if the information was received or not. The question is, Why is Agent 100 no longer answering her communicator? She then lifted her hand and brought up Agent 72's information. Beside it, there was a photo of Sia. With her memories being completely wiped, Agent 72 is as good as dead to us. We have no clue whether they were able to get anything out of her or not. Perhaps it might not be the best idea to go ahead with the attack after all. It was a tough decision, and it was all up to Agent 5 to make. She closed down the holographic display and went back to her seat. I've decided this operation is too risky. We will no longer plan to attack the event. A decision had been made. On the rooftop of Hotel 4, the two figures were the only things standing there. The wind continued to blow up an intense high in the sky. Illegal? Who's done something illegal? This is the first time I've heard of such a thing, Fex replied nervously. He couldn't even look directly at his sister and continued to peer out of the corner of his eye to see what type of face she was making. When finally their two eyes met, he regretted it instantly as it looked like a demon. No more games, Fex. This has become a serious matter now, Silver replied. This was it. He couldn't hide this from his sister, and he had already expected a result such as this one to happen. Knowing full well what was going to happen, he had already decided what he would do. He was never going to give up his blood brother Quinn. He saved his life, and in return, he would save his. Did you create that thing? She asked. No, Fex replied in a composed voice this time, to show this was no laughing matter. When I arrived, I discovered the illegal. At first I thought one of the 13 families had created it, but after realizing it was a white, I realized its master must have been close. I kept a close eye on who that could be, and finally found out. This piece of information needed to be revealed to her. The important part of Fex's plan was he needed Silver to stop looking. Sooner or later, she would have gone looking and found Quinn by his smell. Oh, since when did Fex become a little detective? Silver replied. The law states we can kill illegals on the spot. If we know the creator is in the school, then let's finish off the illegal and return with the vampire. An expected response. His sister was quite predictable because she always followed the rules and tried to deal with things the quickest way without getting others involved. This little piece of insider information was the only thing he could rely on. Suddenly, Fex went down on one knee and placed one of his hands on the ground. He made sure to keep his head facing the floor to show the appropriate respect. This was something that vampire only did to leaders, or lower ranks did to higher ranks. Although Silver was technically a higher rank than Fex, due to their positions within the family, he had never done this to her before, and it all came as a surprise. Please, Silver, let me deal with the illegal, and I promise I will bring the vampire back to you tonight. You know I wanted to stay on Earth as long as possible. The truth was, I knew the family would send someone after me sooner or later. After I found an illegal here, I've been making notes and tracking the vampire and them down. I thought when they would take me back if I also handed them in, there was a chance my punishment could be made lighter. I could use it as an excuse as to why I stayed here so long. Please give me till the end of tomorrow, and I will bring them both to you. A part of what Fex had said was the truth. He had planned this. He just never thought his sister would be the one to get him. If he returned with the shadow vampire user, then his punishment would have been light. Silver thought about this for a while. Fex had broken a severe rule, but not enough to be put into internal slumber, but there was a chance he could be put into temporary sleep for hundreds of years. She would hate to be apart from her brother for so long. If Fex caught these criminals, then there was a chance the punishment could be lightened. All right, I agree with your request, but two things, she said. One, not tomorrow. You need to do everything tonight. Tonight? But that's too soon. Guards are protecting the... Fex said worriedly. If you can't do it tonight, then I will do it myself tomorrow. This will be a test for you, and the second thing, the vampire must be brought to me, but the white must be eliminated. He knew this was the best he was going to get, and in a way, it was a better result than he had expected. Fine, I shall bring the vampire to you and kill the white, Fex answered. The two of them quickly vanished, and now there was no longer anything on the roof. It was as if nothing was ever there. Fex was walking along with the top platform slowly. His usual neatly swept-back black hair was now a complete mess. The stress of everything was getting to him, and he felt like pulling his hair out. It more than felt like it. There were times while walking when he had pulled out small parts of his hair from his head. Nothing noticeable, but he didn't even realize he had been doing it. He needed everything to go perfectly and still felt relieved that his sister had agreed into letting him do everything on his own. The only problem was that he had a time limit. He needed to finish everything by tonight, to pull everything off that he had planned. He needed some help. He couldn't do this alone. Eventually, Fex arrived at the small little coffee shop where the others were sitting outside. It was an hour later than they had planned, but it was still only 7 p.m., plenty of time for the rest of the evening. Sunrise was the time limit. "Hey, is everything okay with you?" Quinn asked, seeing the mess that Fex's hair was in. He had been acting strange all day, and now his appearance was on top of this. Something must have been wrong, and now with the event over, he could ask. With an awkward smile, Fex approached Quinn and started to whisper in his ear. "Do you mind if you and I can talk for private for a second? I have something important I want to talk to you about," Fex whispered. Hearing this, Quinn's heart started to beat, and slight butterflies were felt in his stomach. If it was something that Fex only wanted him to hear about, then it had to be something to do with vampire business. The two boys left the group at the table and walked off slightly to the side. There was no one around them to listen in on their conversation, and they could now talk freely. "So what is it?" Quinn asked. "Did something happen?" Fex went to fix his hair up and had a nervous look on his face. He never was a good liar, and today he had to put the performance of his life on. The only problem was he had to do it more than once. "Quinn, you're going to hate me for this." Fex placed his hand on top of Quinn's shoulder and looked to the floor before lifting his head and looking Quinn in the eye. "This was it? Have the vampires come to get Fex? Do the military know about me? What is it?" Quinn thought nervously. His palms were now sweating, and he just wanted Fex to blurt it out as the tension was killing him. "I'm in love with Layla." "What?" Quinn shouted out so loud that the others at the table could hear. It was something he had never expected out of all the possibilities. "Layla? I mean... Quinn started to stutter his words, he was so surprised. "I thought you had a thing for Erin," Quinn said. "Erin? No, that was different. She was a skillful one like a diamond, but there were no feelings," he replied as he grasped his hands and pulled them in towards his heart. He was trying to make it seem as if this was a painful conversation for him to have. "With Layla, it's true love. I know you two are quite close, and I didn't know whether you liked her either, but the thing is, I don't know how much longer I can stay here, and before I go, I want her to at least know my feelings." Fex then turned around so Quinn couldn't see his face. He wanted to make this as dramatic as possible for him. There was always the chance that Quinn might see through his act. "I know nothing can ever happen between her, you see, and me, but I want her to at least know, and I wanted you to know before I asked her, because you're my blood brother, right?" Suddenly everything was starting to make sense to Quinn. No wonder he had been acting so strangely for the whole day. A confession was always a big deal. With Layla, Quinn didn't feel like he had any special feelings for her. He did feel protective of her, but didn't know whether or not it was beyond a friendship. Even if he did like her, Fex was so passionate right now, he could never deny him this chance. But what did he know was Fex was right. The two of them were blood brothers. "Go ahead," Quinn said. "Make sure you tell her exactly how you feel." After hearing those words, Fex's eyes lit up as he turned back around. "That's great," he said as he started to push Quinn in the direction of the hotel. "Just head home and I'll get the others to do the same. I plan to do it as soon as possible." "You mean now?" "Yes, now, just go," he said as he gave another small shove. With that, Quinn walked back to the hotel room with a little smile on his face. It would be nice if two of his friends became an item, but it was a shame if Fex did have to go back. "Good luck, brother," Quinn thought as he returned to his hotel room. Seeing Quinn walk off like that, the others who were at the coffee table were wondering just what was going on. The two of them seemed to be so dramatic about something and were a little worried that Quinn had disappeared off somewhere. Still, that quickly changed when they saw Fex walking towards them. He didn't have a face of joy or laughter like he did when talking to Quinn. This was the face of business. With his two hands, he swept back his hair and sat down in one of the seats that were placed around the table, and the aura that was coming off him was suffocating them. It quickly reminded them that Fex was not a human, nor was he a human that had been turned into a vampire, but he was a true vampire. "Now that Quinn is gone, I have something important to say to you all. I usually joke around, but this time I'm serious. You may have many questions, but I urge you all to listen and hear me out to the end." Fex paused for a moment to see if any one of them wanted to say something there and then, but they all understood it was an important matter and knew to listen in carefully. Good. The vampires have discovered me, and they know about Peter. They don't know about Quinn yet, but it's only a matter of time. I want to first say this is my fault. They only came because of me, but after finding out about Peter, they can't let him live. To explain quickly, he is something called an illegal. Vampires do not have permission to create others without notifying their leader. Since Quinn created Peter without a leader's permission, Peter is considered illegal. Usually when we discover an illegal, they are executed on the spot. As for the one who created him, they are taken back to the Vampire Council to be judged for their crime. Now, I have no intention of turning Quinn into them. Ever since I got here, he has done so much for me, but they won't leave until I give them the vampire that turned Quinn. With that, I have a plan. Luckily, Peter knows the transformation skill. If we give him disguised as Quinn, that should be able to satisfy them. I will report back saying I have killed the illegal, while also giving them a fake Quinn. Here is where I need your help. There are a few problems with this. Everything needs to be done today. I have told them I would deal with everything. I will be breaking out Peter, and for that, I think, Logan, you will be the best to help me. The second thing might be an even bigger problem. I'm sure we all know if I told Quinn of this plan, he would never agree to sacrifice Peter for himself. Even when I spoke to him earlier, he still thinks there is a way to save Peter. The truth is, this might be the only way to save him. The humans will experiment on him to no end, but the vampires will at least give him a quick death. Giving Peter to them is not enough to fool them. We can smell our kind, and Peter himself is not a vampire, but a subclass of a vampire. If I handed Peter over, they will discover he is a fake in an instant. Out of his pocket, Fex placed the flask on the table and put it in front of Vorden. During my time here, I have concluded that, Vorden, you are the closest to Quinn. Whatever it takes, you must fill up that flask with his blood, but he mustn't find out about this. I have a suggestion that I think only you could do, and that's to knock Quinn and force the blood from him. He is a curious one. If you try to come up with an excuse, there's a good chance he will follow you, and it will ruin the whole plan. By the time Quinn wakes up, we would have been gone. Fex had finished detailing everything to the others, and they couldn't quite believe it. Both Logan and Vorden had suspected something like this would happen one day. They just didn't expect it to happen in the middle of an event like this. The other thing was, they didn't even have time to prepare. They would have to act immediately. Vorden picked up the flask and placed it in his back pocket. We have no choice. We have to do this, Vorden said. But I have one question. Surely sooner or later they will find out that Peter is not the person they are looking for. What happens then? Will they come to look for Quinn again? And what will happen to you once they find out you tricked them? The serious face on Fex had changed to quite a sad-looking one after hearing this question. It was almost as if he had prepared himself for something. The vampires are careful ones. It will be a while before they send someone after Quinn. At least this will give him more time. Quinn is special. I know that he gets stronger by the day. As for your second question, that is not for you to worry about and for me to deal with. With everything said and done, and with no time to waste, the group split up and proceeded with the plan. In the middle of Fex's explanation, after hearing and learning that the matter had something to do with Quinn, a particular person had found out that he could be in trouble. In the dark back room of Vorden's mind, Syl had stood up and was interested in what they had to say. Most things seemed uninteresting to him, and with nothing happening so far that relied on Vorden using him, he had remained quiet. He listened carefully while standing by Vorden on his left side, and Rayton was on the right. The explanation had just finished, as Fex asked Vorden to gather Quinn's blood. "Well, of course, we're not going to agree to that, right?" Rayton asked. "Hey, I know I'm crazy and I'll fight anything, but do you remember what happened last time? He turned into that bald monster. Sorry, but I'm not fighting in this one." "Rayton, didn't you just say you would fight anything?" Vorden replied, annoyed. "Sorry, I refuse to fight anything that's that ugly with no plus side. At least when fighting a beast, we get a crystal out of it. A human? Well, that's just fun, but that..." After hearing what Rayton had to say, Vorden was concerned and was hesitant whether or not to agree with the plan. Quinn was strong. If it was the Quinn from a few months back, then maybe without Rayton's help and strong ability, he would be able to knock Quinn out and gather some blood. Right now, he would need at least 2 strong abilities to increase his chances. It wasn't just a question of winning such a fight, but being strong enough to overpower Quinn, to the point where he could win without having to badly hurt him. He could always try to find an excuse to ask about the blood, but he couldn't think of anything right now and needed a backup plan in case that didn't work. It looked like Fex's suggestion of beating and knocking him out was the best one. The question was whether he could do it without Rayton's help. "Say, we'll do it," Syl said all of a sudden. This response came as a surprise to Vorden. The whole reason they had gotten close with Quinn in the first place was due to the way Syl saw Quinn. "If we don't do this, the bad people will take Quinn away, right?" Syl asked. It seemed like he had understood more than he thought. Vorden felt bad for underestimating Syl. Maybe he was slowly getting better. His mind returned to what it once was. "Yes, you're right. If we do this, then the bad people won't take Quinn away." With Syl agreeing to help and fight Quinn just in case, they decided to take the job and get the flask. Vorden asked Layla to head back to her hotel room and prepare whatever she thought might help. In her room, there were still a few items she had from Pure that should be able to help block out the cameras around the place. The truth was that Vorden wanted Layla to leave him alone while he made some preparations of his own. He didn't expect her to have some useful things. If there was a chance he was going to fight Quinn, then he needed the strongest powers he could find, and he knew just the place to get them. Inside her hotel room, Layla went under her bed and pulled out what looked like a small metal box. On the front was a keypad, where she proceeded to input the code in her mind. Soon the small metal box was opened, revealing the black ball that was usually in there. This time, though, the black ball looked a little different than before, as a blue flashing light was blinking on the front. This indicated that there had been a message left on it. Placing the blinking black ball on her bed, she chose to ignore it. "No, I am no longer a part of Pure or that life." With her palm facing towards the ball, she started to concentrate. Slowly, components of the black ball were being pulled out piece by piece. They were gradually lifted away from the black ball, and eventually the ball stopped blinking. Inside the box, there were still a few more things inside. She quickly grabbed them and placed them in the pouch around her waist. They were special tools that she had been trained with her whole life, although she hadn't used them that much since it was her first mission and she hadn't been given any tasks. She quickly went to leave the room to meet up with Vorden at their designated spot, but before doing so, she turned around one more time and took a look at the black ball. As she closed the door, she muttered, "Goodbye, Agent 100. Most of the students were still outside enjoying the atmosphere, checking out the stalls and playing all the games. It was busier than the first day because the public had also been invited to check out the place as well. It wasn't too late, and everyone was filled with excitement. However, Vorden was not one of these people. He continuously looked around the area to see if he could find the person he was looking for. Eventually, on his way to his destination, his search had led him back to the block game Quinn had played the other day. There were more people stationed outside, and there was even a large queue. It seemed like the video had made the game go viral. While looking at the line, he could only see students making up the majority of the queue. There were some with high levels on their wristwatch, but he couldn't tell what their abilities were just by looking at them. It was a shame that Berg, one of the Sunshield Fire users, was taking part in the fighting tournament. The strongest students currently in the school were all underneath the arena and were in that event. This meant Vorden only had one choice, but had no idea where to find them. However, it looked like luck hadn't given up on him yet, since the girly-looking man who sat by them today was also by the gaming area. Wasn't he one of the 4 leaders, the leader of the Greylash family? Owen, if I remember correctly? Vorden thought. While Vorden was looking in his direction, the 2 pairs of eyes seemed to catch each other, and the man gave a wink. Owen had left the booth of the game he was watching and decided to walk over towards Vorden. Seeing this, Vorden strangely chose to walk away from the premises, up to the ledge where there were next to no people. "Oh, he wants me to follow him, huh? Well, this should be interesting," Owen thought. Owen decided to play along with whatever games the student had, remembering that both he and the other one had reacted strongly after witnessing the video. He had returned to the gaming area tonight, expecting the student to perhaps return, gaming for he was one in the video. The other students thought of the same thing, but it looked like that wouldn't be happening. All the other students seemed dull after witnessing the video. As soon as the man had come over without saying a word, Vorden had gone in for a quick and unsuspected grab. All he needed to do was get in a single touch, and the powers would be copied. It was truly unexpected. Owen had expected that the student only wanted to talk, but his reactions were far quicker than the boys. Releasing that Vorden's intent was not to hurt him, he quickly thought that there must have been some other reason for this strange attack. There was no power behind this strike, and it was too sudden in front of too many people. Owen quickly opened up his gown, and from his waist he pulled out a metallic fan. He quickly spread it open and blocked Vorden's fingers from touching him. However, Vorden was persistent and tried again with his other hand, but that too was knocked away. Not knowing Vorden's true intentions, Owen stepped back and initiated a small spark in his right hand. It was out of sight for others to see, since his body was blocking most of it, plus he had purposely made it very small. It was a warning. If Vorden tried to strike again, he wouldn't hesitate to use his powers. I have no choice, Vorden thought. This is for Quinn. The look in Vorden's eyes suddenly changed, even being felt by Owen. He had never felt such a strong presence come from a student before. He thought that he was right to think those kids from before were interesting. Using the fan, he covered the bright smile on his face. Never before had a student made him feel this way. My name is Vorden Blade from the Blade family. Using my name, I request you to stand down. Answer my request and give me your hand. Upon hearing the words spoken by the student, he now knew it was no laughing matter. The smile he had before dropped in an instant, and as quick as the smile had dropped, so did Owen with his request and gave Vorden his hand. Owen wasn't very recognizable to the outside people. Unlike the other family leaders, no one knew what he looked like. Today was the first time the newly appointed head was revealed, and that was only found out to the people in the booth. Sure, there were some like Quinn and his group who had paid attention to who was sitting in those seats, but none knew about the situation. Looking at someone so young, they would have never suspected them of being a leader. The people around outside weren't even paying attention to such a thing that was happening off to the side. They were far too involved in their things, or the gaming center that was close by. After learning about Vorden's true name, he had no choice but gave up his hand. The excitement that was felt when following this student now turned into horror. Although his heart was beating rapidly and he was a little scared, there still was a little spark in the back of his mind. I wonder why he needs to borrow my power. His curiosity to find out new and exciting things had always been his downfall. He even felt that his current views were different from the head and those around him. Owen was always interested in the younger generation who was closer to his age. He wanted to know how they felt about the way things were currently run. However, if he was to try to get involved or intervene in a situation like this, it would have possibly been one of the most dangerous things to do. Thank you, Vorden said, letting go of Owen's hand. No matter how interested Owen was, now was not the time to get involved with such a dangerous individual. He took a few steps back and planned to get away, but seeing his actions, Vorden called out to him immediately. Wait, Vorden called out. I want you to take me to where the other leaders are. Hearing this came as a considerable shock to Owen. Was he planning to use their powers too? The Big Four leaders' powers were beyond a level 8 ability. It was to the point where it couldn't be measured. Looking at Vorden, it was clear he was a student, whoever he had trouble with or whoever he needed to deal with. Just his power alone should have been enough. Now the excitement was too much, and he had even forgotten to hide the grin on his face. Maybe the events won't be so boring after all. With no choice, Owen walked and Vorden followed behind. On the way, they quickly went to one of the stalls to purchase a change of clothing for Vorden. He too was now in a large white gown that was a little too big, as part of the back was dragging along the floor. Is this necessary? He asked. Of course, Owen chuckled as the two of them continued to walk. Eventually, they reached their destination. It was a hotel room that was slightly larger and fancier than the rest, Hotel Number 1. This was where all of the higher-class members that were invited to the event were staying. The rest had to get a train out to other parts of the city and come in early in the morning. Before entering the building, the two of them stopped outside. Do you know how to use my powers? Owen asked. Not everything, but I should be able to do something, Vorden replied as he started to twirl his hand around. Particular elemental abilities were quite similar in use, but reacted differently when being used. An example of this was when gathering water. To gather water and wind, one did the same thing, but water would be a bit harder to control due to its weight and shape of it. When twirling his hand in a circular motion, he tried to imagine the ability as a water one. Suddenly following the palm of his hand, a stream of electricity would follow it. He continued to move his hands in a circular motion, and now a full circle of blue electrical light could be seen. Quick learner as expected, Owen said, impressed. The kids at our school would cry in horror if they found out you could produce something like that on your first try. Owen then opened up two of his fingers and created a connected spark, passing the blue lightning between his thumb to his finger. This should do. There is no need to perform what you did before. With the quick lesson over, the two of them walked up to the front of the hotel lobby where the guards were stationed. Owen was allowed to pass, but Vorden was stopped. "That kid is with me. He is a member of the Greylash family," Owen said with a wink toward Vorden. He suddenly realized why they had the quick lesson before. Opening up his thumb and his index finger, he had presented to the guards the same trick that Owen had shown moments before. There was no better proof that one was part of the Greylash family, other than displaying it with their powers. Usually this wouldn't have been enough, but with one of the Big Four, who was also considered one of the leaders of the current United Earth Alliance. They allowed him to pass. The elevator was taken to one of the top floors, and when they arrived, there were only a few rooms with large doors. These doors all had different decorations on the outside. In the center of the double door going over the parting point was the engraving of the family's crest. No guards, Vorden noticed. This was upon the request of the four themselves. They preferred it this way. Secrecy was a big part of their power, and Vorden knew that better than anyone. Right now they were standing in front of what looked like a large shield with a flame on it. Owen knocked on the door and was quite pleased he would be interacting with Bernie once again. "Those blasted soldiers, I told them not to disturb me. I'm going to have to speak to Owen about this. This treatment is unacceptable." The ramblings of a deep-voiced man could be heard through the doors. It seemed like the man was trying to speak quietly, but he had one of those voices that would be carried and heard throughout no matter what. The doors flew open wide and fast, and in its place was a large, round-bellied man with messy red hair, the trait of the Sunshield family. The instant the doors opened, Bernie's ears started to produce steam at the sight of the man in front of him. "You," he pointed at Owen. "So it looks like you wanted that fight after all, to come to my room in the middle of the night." He had completely ignored the person standing next to him and continued to focus only on Owen. In case things got ugly, Owen had placed his hand on his metallic fan. Vorden now realized if he was planning to use such a weapon against one of the Big Four, it couldn't have been a regular fan, but a high-class beast weapon instead. "As much as I would like to teach you to not judge a book by its cover, I have come for over reasons," Owen tried to explain, but it seemed like Bernie wasn't listening at all. Flames from both of his forearms were slowly starting to appear upward towards his elbow, and a red-hot tribal pattern was shown on his skin. This was something Vorden hadn't seen when he thought with Berg. Is it part of his soul weapon? Realizing this, there was a chance this fight could get serious, fast. Owen quickly stepped to the side and presented both of his hands at Vorden. "This man is part of the Blade family, and he has asked for our assistance." Hearing the name, Bernie's reaction had immediately changed, just like Owen's. The flames had died down, and the tribal tattoos that went up his arm disappeared as well. Bernie gave the person next to him one look, and knew what he wanted instantly, and presented his hand while looking away, making sure not to make eye contact. "If that's all you came here for, get out of here. I was just about to take a nice hot bath," Bernie said, but now with a lot less anger in his voice, making sure to not offend the person in front of him. Now with two of the strongest powers in the world, Vorden was confident he could deal with Quinn. There was no need for him to get the Greylash's power and inform more people that he was here. His power was to control beasts, and there weren't any around here. Besides, even if there were, it would be too difficult to move and would cause a huge uproar. Then there was only Jack left, the newest addition to the big families. Unlike the other families, it had no history and was only recently created. The others had been going on for generations, even before the war with the Dalki. If Vorden was to ask him for anything, he wasn't even sure he would comply. However, there was another reason. With this much power following through his body, if he was to meet Jack right now, there was a good chance he wouldn't hold back and burn him to a crisp. It might ignite a war, and that wasn't his decision to make. He wasn't the leader of the Blade family, and if they found out he was abusing their name like this, even he could get into trouble. "I don't have to tell you guys that I was never here," Vorden said, "but before I go, I need one more thing. Is there a place or spot I can use where no one will know if I'm using these powers?" Bernie huffed out a puff of hot air before answering. "There is. I often use it to cool down once in a while. They created the room with me in mind, and of course, there are no cameras. Even if they were, everything would have been burnt by now. It's an empty room with nothing inside, and the walls are soundproof. Whatever you're planning to do in there, nobody will be able to tell. It's a place only permitted to be used by us. It was something I had to fight hard for them to make." "Perfect," Vorden replied. The two leaders had scary thoughts in their minds about what possibly could Vorden need the room for, and why did he need the two of their powers, but they didn't ask, and only told Vorden where to go. Down the hotel lobby, the two boys Fex and Logan were heading towards Logan's room. After finding out about the plan, Logan was happy to hear that his time hadn't been wasted. He informed Fex that plenty of things in his room might be of great use to them. The walk to Logan's room was a quiet one, though. The two boys were hardly left alone with each other, and their first meeting was quite an eventful one. Fex didn't hold any hard feelings about Logan blasting him across the room, but thought that Logan might have felt wrong about it. However, Logan hadn't even thought about the situation even once before. The reason for his silence was just because he wasn't much of a talker unless he wanted to be. When he had something to say, he would speak all out, explaining every little detail. But most of the time he wouldn't be speaking, spending all his time thinking about things inside his head. Still, Fex couldn't think of a better person who would be able to help him with his task. He had seen how helpful he was during the True Dream plan, and he needed his smarts. The two of them entered Logan's room, and Fex's eyes opened wide at what he could see. Unlike the other places, Logan seemed to be quite different from the rest. "Is all this stuff yours?" Fex asked, still looking around the room in amazement. "I know, it's a shame I couldn't bring more stuff with me, but at least I don't feel uncomfortable with all this around," Logan said as he proceeded to head to his desk. The room looked like it had been completely converted. Each student was given the same size room, and the layout of the rooms was the same. Yet Logan somehow, in the short time here, had managed to transform the whole place into a miniature version of his room back at the academy. The desk was now filled with a laptop that had multiple gadgets and wires attached to it. The room had several other gadgets and chests around and about in different room areas, and digital maps and other things were displayed on the wall. He then further realized that Logan had only been knocked out of the tournament and spent very little time in the room. There were so many questions that Fex wanted to ask, but there wasn't enough time. "I'm not sure if you knew, but if you didn't pick me to help you break Peter out from the underground arena, then I was going to volunteer anyway," Logan said as he pulled up a 3D model of the floor directly underneath the arena. "I wasn't too bothered about the event, I'm sure you know, but I was concerned about Peter. In case Quinn or the others changed their mind, I tried to find a way to help Peter escape. While trying to find a way from the dungeon, it was impossible for me as I had no clue what it looked like. But with the underground arena, I was able to explore and keep track of the guards and everyone's attention personally. I came up with a plan, but there was still a problem. Even if we could get Peter out, what do we do then? They would soon notice and prepare a search for him. We're in the middle of a military base 1, and we know where nothing is. With nowhere for him to go, breaking him out would be useless and would only further get us into trouble. It seems like my research will be put into use after all. I'm assuming you, or whoever was planning to take you, already has a plan to leave this place." Logan then proceeded to show and explain to Fex all the small details. Logan had kept track of where each camera was positioned and its range of motion. He even had the guard schedule planned in his head, the one standing by the events as well as the two that were always by Peter's side. The level of detail was incredible, and when looking around the room, he noticed there had been an immense amount of research that had been put into trying to get Peter out of the dungeon as well. "I guess he means a lot to you, a true friend, huh?" Fex said. Logan thought about this for a while. "I guess," Logan replied. "After meeting Quinn, I have made a few companions, but Peter was more than a friend. He was an assistant, and it would be hard for me to find an assistant as good as him." Fex was slightly confused by Logan's words. He couldn't imagine Peter being a good assistant, but soon realized, based on Logan's personality, Peter was probably the best one for him. Never asked any question, remained silent most of the time, never went to sleep, and would do as asked. In a way, Peter was like a robot. And the only thing Logan was surrounded by most of the time were tech-like things. A robot would be the perfect assistant. With the plan and all the details ready, Logan left the room, but not before erasing all the details off his computer. He then walked over to the corner of the room and pulled out a small metallic box. Once opening the package inside were 6 different masks that covered the bottom part of one's face. He then walked over and presented the masks to Fex. "What's this?" Fex asked. "Do you remember Quinn's mask? During the process, we went through a few prototypes. It was a waste to throw them away, so I decided to keep them and made some enhancements. The masks can communicate with each other as well as be used as a voice changer. It will be used to keep our identity hidden." Looking down at the mask, he could see there were indeed plenty of designs, and that's when he noticed there was one that looked a little like a bull. It suited him well, especially since he had Ham still. "I'll take this one." The two placed the masks in their back pocket as they left the hotel room one more time and headed for the elevators. Once inside, they headed down to the first floor and were patiently waiting in the lobby for the next part of their plan. This was important, as the timing had to be perfect. When the guards would change shifts, This was their moment to get Peter out. The two went over to a table that had several sofas placed around it. It was starting to get late now, so fewer and fewer people were beginning to pass through the hotel lobby area. Once again, the two of them seemed to be sitting in silence, and it was starting to drive Fex a little crazy. They still had a good 20 minutes before they had to make their move, and he was wondering if he could last that long without saying anything. However, surprisingly, Logan was the first one to speak to Fex. "I assume you know a lot of V's, yes? Originally being from there and all?" Logan asked. "V's?" Vex replied, then soon releasing what it stood for. "Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, I know a lot. Why?" "Do you know any that seem to have an interest in computer systems of the sort? Or advanced in technology? Perhaps even obsessed?" Logan asked. After meeting both Fex and Quinn, he could tell there was a clear difference. While handing the mask over to Fex, Logan made sure to make contact, yet no message appeared like the one that had happened when he touched Quinn. This meant that the system seemed to be unique to Quinn. Logan was looking for answers to his questions and possibly thought there was a chance he could find out who created the book Quinn had been given. Whoever had made such a system was way beyond anything they currently had. "Honestly, the technology we, V's use is a little bit more advanced than what you have, but at the same time it feels old. It's kind of hard to explain. I guess V's are quite traditional in a sense, so some are against using technology to better their lives, but we have to rely on it in some cases. Because of this, I don't know anyone specifically who is interested in technology, apart from a few of the young ones like me," Fex replied. "Interesting. But then who created all your technological advancements if they are more advanced than what we currently have?" Logan asked. Fex started to laugh nervously as he had never really thought about these types of things before. He just took the stuff he had for granted without thinking much about it. "I'll be honest, I have no clue. But when you asked about obsessiveness, it does remind me of a story the others used to tell me. You see, just like your head generals of each military base, we also have leaders or council members. 13 to be precise, and number 10 was always known to be, well, a bit crazy. Although he wasn't obsessed with the technology, he was obsessed with magic. His powers were unique, even for vampires, and I heard some of the vampires' advancements were due to him. But honestly, other than that, I don't know much at all. I'm still young for a vampire, and this was all before my time." It was a long shot, but it was the only thing Logan could go off. Perhaps if he ever obtained more information about vampires in the future, he could look into this 10th council member more. Just then, they heard a beep from their watches, indicating it was time for them to move. As soon as the timer went off, a few little spiders fell to the ground from underneath Logan's sleeve. The two boys continued their fake conversation with hand gestures and such. "So, what's your favorite sandwich?" Fex asked, trying to make the conversation look a tad bit more realistic by asking a real question. However, Logan looked as if he was struggling to decide his answer. He placed his hand on his chin and looked up into a corner. I would probably have to say cheese and onion, but since my body doesn't deal with cheese that well, I guess if we were talking about favorites, then it would depend on my cravings at the time. Regarding how the question is phrased, the best sandwich differs. Do you mean the best tasting? Best one for your health? Or perhaps the best ingredients?" I guess you can tell me all three then?" Fex's tone had a nervous vibe to it, as he wasn't expecting a real answer back. The spiders had now fanned out, and once they had completed their tasks, they reported back to the server, namely Logan. In the middle of their intense conversation, Logan suddenly stopped and stood up. "Let's go." The underground arena was accessible from any hotel room. It was designed this way so when contestants were eliminated, they could easily rejoin their military base. This meant that each of the elevators was in some way linked. One would usually require a pass to go to the lower floors, but that wasn't a problem to worry about, not for Logan anyway. They continued walking through the lobby and headed towards the elevator area. Fex glanced at the camera in the corner and could see a spider falling from it before rejoining back up with Logan. Once the doors opened, they both stepped in. The cameras within and outside the elevators weren't able to capture their figures. The cameras were set to loop footage for 2 minutes, once the time was up. It would then begin showing the live feed. It was currently nighttime, and there were no other contestants that would be making their way from the underground up to the lobby. Once they were past these cameras, there would be no more problems since there were no other cameras in the underground section. Logan could assume this was due to the same reason why there weren't any cameras at the school. Many students would be practicing their abilities. Their families simply wouldn't allow them to spy and gather information by looking at what the students were doing. While in the elevator, the two of them placed both their masks over their face. So far, everything's going well, Fex confidently commented. Now, Vorden, Layla, it's all up to you. Without the blood, everything they were doing was pointless. Vorden told Layla to meet him outside of the number 1 military building. He even informed her that he found a place and everything was ready. All she needed to do now was bring Quinn over to the destination. Since he already told her of his plan beforehand, there was no need for her to use her tools. There would be no cameras inside when Quinn will enter the room with Vorden. Her job there was to be the lookout. Although only members from the Big Four could use the room, that didn't mean they wouldn't. However, there was still a slight chance that Mona, Bree, or Jack would try to use it. Bernie had informed Vorden that this was extremely unlikely. In all the years the place had been built, it was never used once by them. He reckoned that he was the only one to have ever used the place. She stood outside Quinn's door and took a deep breath before raising her hand to knock. It felt like the work she was doing now was more like the double agent type stuff, back when she was in Pure. These were the things that she had been trained to do. It seemed a little funny that she was still using it, despite already leaving them. Okay, let's do this. Just as Layla was about to tap the door with her knuckles, it suddenly opened. Layla, what are you doing here this late? Quinn asked her. But how? She started asking questions in her mind. How did he know someone was by the door? Oh, you don't need to worry. I could smell you were coming, Quinn responded. Smell? These words stung her a bit. She was tempted to lift her arms to see if she did smell that bad. Upon seeing that she felt somehow insulted, Quinn realized that what he said just now could have been easily misinterpreted. No, I didn't mean that you smell. I meant, like, you smell great, he said while blushing. You know, because of my sensitive nose and all. The both of them left the room and headed outside towards the military base. Once Layla said that she wanted to walk for a bit and that she had something important to say. Quinn thought that he already knew what the subject would be. It had to be about Fex's confession. As the two of them were walking, they felt a little awkward because of their previous conversation at the door. Quinn didn't know what to say to make it up to her. While pondering over this matter, Quinn had fallen back a little and was walking behind Layla. He noticed that he was staring at her from behind a lot more than usual. Due to this, he started to think back about what Fex said, about how he wanted to inform him beforehand, since he assumed that something was going on between the two of them. And now, Layla asked to have a private conversation with him as well. No, it can't be. Does Layla like me? When she asked him to turn her, did she mean something else by it? His mind couldn't help but have these kinds of thoughts. If Layla likes me, and Fex likes her, then that means... Oh no, I'm in a love triangle. If she's here to confess to me, then what do I say? I can't say yes to her. I can't do this to Fex. While his mind wandered about in this confused and crazy contemplation, the both of them eventually arrived outside a small building behind the hotel. Although it was very plain-looking, it was also large at the same time. This reminded Quinn of the storage room where he first found the shadow ability. He wondered why Layla chose this place to converse with him. He could only guess it was due to it being away from everyone else. Layla then turned around and faced him. It looked as if she wanted to say something, but was also struggling with how to say it. I know what you want to talk about. Quinn decided to initiate the discussion. He didn't want the situation to be more awkward than it already was. This is about Fex, isn't it? How does he know? She was surprised once again. Feeling a bit contemplated, she started to speak. Look, Quinn, you don't need to say any more. However, Quinn suddenly interrupted her. Quinn, Vorden is waiting for you inside, she blurted out before things got out of hand. Wait, Vorden? How is he involved in all this? Quinn was now truly confused about what was going on. Look, I just felt bad about lying, saying that I needed to speak to you. The truth is, Vorden said that he wanted to talk to you. He's inside waiting. Layla then walked over to the metallic-looking doors and inputted the code that Vorden told her. It was nearly the same storage room back on the Red Portal planet. At first, Quinn moved to the entrance, but he stopped just outside of it. Could he trust Layla? Because he didn't know what was going on, Quinn was starting to think that this was possibly a trap set up by Pure. Perhaps Layla was planning to double-cross him and was still working with them. Is Vorden inside here? Quinn turned around and asked while looking at her. At that moment, a hand suddenly pulled him from behind. Just get in here, you... Vorden's voice suddenly piped up. he shuffled both him and Quinn inside as the door shut close. When the motion sensor lights automatically turned on, they could both see that they were in a large, plain white room. There were no windows around. There was nothing except the door they just entered from. When Quinn turned around and saw Vorden, his worries settled down, since it seemed like Layla was telling the truth. The look on Vorden's face did not greet a friend, but instead it was of concern. In just an instant, his expression changed. Vorden now had the friendliest smile that Quinn had ever seen. "Hey? Vorden, are you okay?" Quinn couldn't help but ask. "Vorden?" he responded, while tilting his head to the side and placing his finger on his lips. "No, I'm not Vorden. Did you forget my name?" he responded with a question. This strange reaction made Vorden look almost like a handsome blonde-haired puppy. "What's going on?" Quinn thought. He was quite baffled. It seemed like all of his friends were acting strange recently. "Aren't I meant to be the weird one in our group?" "Don't you remember? We met before. I'm Syl." There could be two outcomes of the situation with Vorden and Quinn. In Vorden's head, the best outcome would be for him to ask Quinn to put his blood in the flask kindly. If Quinn were to question why, he would simply tell him to trust him, and he would inform him about the details tomorrow. However, knowing Quinn, he would try to get involved in some way or another. On top of that, he would try following him. If the first part of the plan worked, then Vorden would hand the flask to Layla while keeping an eye on Quinn, making sure he didn't leave the room until everything was done. Hopefully this would all lead to avoiding him fighting with Quinn. Then again, Vorden was someone who always needed to prepare himself for all of the possible scenarios. There was a good chance that when asking for his blood, Quinn wouldn't do so without asking why, leading him to forcefully take the blood. In both cases, these would lead to a fight. If this was to happen, Vorden wanted the fight to be over as quickly as possible, which meant he would need to utilize both of his abilities. The second Vorden had pushed Quinn into the room. He had made the switch with Syl, so if anything were to happen, they would be ready. "Okay, so remember what we've planned?" Vorden asked, standing right next to him. Syl was currently in the seat, and Rayton was standing a little bit further away from them with a smile. "If you think for a second that this will go the way you expect it to go, then you're crazy," Rayton said out loud with a little chuckle, waiting for disaster to strike. "Repeat after me. I need you to trust me, Quinn, and I need you to do me a favor. I don't want you to ask why, but I need some of your blood," said Vorden. However, the words were simply ignored as Syl decided to do his own thing. "But I'm not Vorden. Did you forget my name? I'm Syl," he said outward, looking at Quinn. Hearing Vorden speak, it seemed a little strange to Quinn. Although it sounded like him, at the same time it didn't. The emphasis on certain words, as well as the fluctuations in his voice, were just a tad off. Not just that, but the way he was currently standing. Everything just felt wrong, and now he was saying his name was Syl? "What are you doing, Syl?" Vorden could not help but shout. "He can't find out about you." Syl turned his head and looked at Vorden behind him before responding. "Shut up. I can do what I want. It's my body anyway." Vorden gulped as he took a step back. There was nothing he could do when Syl got like this, so he decided to just wait and see the outcome. "It's been a while since we've last met," Syl giggled. "Let me ask you something. Are we friends?" There was a brief pause as Quinn was trying to figure out just what was going on. "Of course we are, Vorden," Quinn replied. Syl shook his head rapidly back and forth as he peculiarly stomped his feet. At the same time, flames from his feet rose into the air before dissipating. "No," he yelled. "Not Vorden. I already told you. I'm Syl." Seeing a fire ability appear all of a sudden made Quinn take a few steps back. He knew this power belonged to one of the Big Four, so he could not help but wonder why Vorden currently had it. Something strange was happening here. Syl? Why does Vorden keep referring to himself as Syl? While thinking of this, Quinn started to think about the possibilities. Did Pure get to him? Or has someone with a mind control ability taken over Vorden's body? Perhaps it might have even been a vampire. He didn't fully understand the capabilities of the vampires, so he thought this might have been their way to try and get rid of him once they found out. Whatever the case was, it was clear that the person in front of him right now wasn't the Vorden he knew. "Why are you stepping back?" Syl said as he reached out his hand. "Don't be scared. Why are you scared?" Suddenly, tears started to flow from his eyes. They ran down his cheek before trickling to the ground. "Don't be scared. Don't be scared," He continued to mumble as he looked at Quinn. "Please don't be scared, Kaser. I promise I will never hurt you again." Although the words spoken were quiet, with Quinn's hearing he could hear every word. He heard him speak of a name which he did not know of. "Please, Syl," Vorden yelled, trying one more time to reach out to him. He knew that if this went on, perhaps Quinn would be seriously hurt. The goal was only to get his blood and nothing more. "Quinn is not Kaser. We need him. We are here to help him, right? You don't want him to go, so just ask for the blood." Making sure to not be too pushy, this was all that he could do while he silently prayed. The words had gotten through to him, as Syl saw the worried look on his face. He grabbed his hand and placed it on his chest, while wiping his tears away with the other. "He's right. You are not Kaser." Looking up, he gave a smile. "Please remember my name next time. It's Syl. Since we're friends, I need to ask you for a favor." Syl then went to the side and pulled out the metallic flask that had been given to him by Fex. "I need you to fill this up with your blood." Looking at the flask, Quinn noticed it in an instant. That was because it was the same one that he had been gifted with by Fex. This was the deciding factor in his mind. The vampires must have gotten to Vorden. Somehow they had found out. It was probably the reason why Fex had been acting strangely before. He now felt stupid for believing such an obvious lie. Did he betray me? Quinn pondered. Perhaps when he asked Quinn to leave that day, the vampires came and surrounded his friends. After that, they forced them to complete this task. He didn't know why they needed his blood, but he still had a lot to learn about vampires in the first place. Then again, there was the possibility that they couldn't kill him outright, due to him being one of the leaders. Still, whatever the case was, Quinn wasn't going to go down without a fight. "I'm sorry I can't," Quinn replied. "And Vorden, I don't know how, but I promise I'll save you." With nothing left to say, Quinn activated his shadow quip ability. Dark shadows quickly covered his arms and legs, as well as his new chest piece in the center. He then quickly charged forward and left the clouds of shadows behind, but right now, his body was all of his equipment. "I know how strong you are, Vorden, hence the reason why I can't go easy on you." "Quick, Syl, take him out now!" Vorden shouted. Syl quickly curled up, bringing his arms and head towards his chest. He then gathered the power of the fire energy around the center. Soon, little flames could be seen on top of all his clothing. Slowly, they started to burn away even in the fire-resistant school uniform. The firepower was too strong. As Quinn started to get closer, he could sense something was up. "Shadow control!" Lifting the shadow in front of him, he made sure to have it ready, prepared as a shield for whatever was to come. Once Vorden attacked, that's when Quinn would strike using his blood abilities. At the moment, he still hadn't used his blood bank, or his flask, so his HP was low. This was another reason for him wanting to finish off the fight fast. Enough time had passed, and Syl was ready. He suddenly extended his hands and head outward like a spring, causing a dome of fire to be released outward, heading in all directions. There was nothing Quinn could do but brace himself with his shadow. As the outer edge of the fire dome grew close, it had finally hit his shadow. As soon as the fire had touched Quinn's shadow, it had disappeared in an instant, consuming all of his MC cells. This could have only meant one thing. The attack was just too powerful. Whose fire ability did he copy? Quinn thought. However, the shadow was able to cause a small crack in the dome, allowing him to pass through and come out of the attack unharmed. But now, with no more MC cells, he could no longer rely on his shadow ability, only leaving him with the blood abilities. "It seems I have no choice. I have to use my blood bank. I'll just curb my addiction next time." But before he could even do that, a blue stream of light flashed before his eyes, and Syl, who was on the other side of the room, was now directly in front of him. "Go to sleep, my dear Quinn," Syl said as he placed his hand on top of Quinn's head and unleashed a fury of electricity through his body. His body shook rapidly back and forth as the electricity passed through. He gritted his teeth, trying to take the pain, but it was too much for him as his vision slowly faded to black. As Syl let go of Quinn's head, he allowed his body to drop to the floor. Standing inside the small room looking at Peter directly in front of them, Fex couldn't believe it. They had successfully managed to make their way to Peter's room with no trouble at all. This type of thing could have only been done with extensive research, and Fex looked at Logan in even more amazement now. For Logan, his plan turned out better than he thought. Everything was easier than it would have been anywhere else, and the reason was that the military had kept to the same routine down to the last second. There were a few variables that Logan had planned out for, but expected that he might not have needed them. When walking through certain hallways and through the rooms, everything had turned out as he had expected. Still, he had kept his spiders out to watch just in case. If they had made any changes to their routine, the spiders would have been able to see and inform him beforehand. There was only one tricky part of the whole operation, and that was due to the room Peter was in. To keep an eye on Peter, he had been placed in a separate section compared to everyone else, a room made just for him that was void with contact to the outside. On top of this, 2 guards were to be stationed by the door. This was better for both Fex and Quinn. The military had expected an attack from the outside. The easiest time to attack would be during the event when the soldiers were busy and spread thin. If they caused a panic, they would be too busy dealing with the public than dealing with the attack. They were confident in their measures and never expected someone from the inside to do anything. Their main concern was with others, or the students seeing them, so this was better for them altogether. The 2 guards who were stationed at the front door were where Fex would come into play. The 2 of them stood just around the corner from Peter's room silently as they waited for the answer from above. As soon as Vorden had successfully knocked out Quinn, they would act. If not, they would turn around and abandon the whole thing. They needed to wait because the only thing they could do at this point was to knock out the 2 guards in front of them and take Peter away. Logan had timed everything, so the shift change had just happened. No one would find their beaten bodies for another hour, which meant they needed to take Peter to Silver within the time frame. Then a message had been received from above. "He did it, and a lot quicker than I thought," Logan said, surprised. From around the corner of the corridor, 2 spiders were released once again. They scaled up the wall and went above the ceiling. They walked until they were just above the 2 soldiers' heads. "You ready?" Logan asked as he could see Fex was fiddling with a string in his hand. This string was different from the usual type he would use. When Fex used his abilities before, it would always be nearly invisible to the eye, but this string was dyed red like blood. The ability had been infused with his vampire blood abilities to make it several times stronger. The only problem was it took some preparation time to use. This was why he was unable to use it against the King Tier beast before. At the same time, he had already deemed it would be useless because the King Tier beast was far too strong. Still, for situations like this, it was perfect. When Fex was finally ready, he gave the nod, and at the same time, the spiders fell hovering above the neck of the guards. Both of them felt something ticklish on their neck. One soldier tried slapping it, while another turned around trying to fling whatever was on him. This small distraction was all that was needed for Fex to whip out his blood-red strings. Quickly, they wrapped around their mouths like a spiderweb, before wrapping around their legs and pulling them to the ground. Then finally, their whole arms and legs had been covered. They tried to break free from the strings, but it was nearly impossible for them. The spiders continued to move along their body as they scanned for any traces of equipment that could give them away. The only thing that was found was a tracker that had been placed along with an alert button. However, the alert hadn't been pressed, so it was best to leave everything as it was for now. The 2 of them entered the room, and they could see Peter standing there still. He had heard the commotion outside and was wondering what was going on, but he had never expected to see these 2. Peter had already given up hope of being saved. "I never expected you to save me," Peter said. "Don't thank us yet, until you hear what we have to say, and it's not good news," Fex replied. Back above ground, Vorden had now switched back with Syl. He had sent a report to the others to proceed with what they were doing. He hadn't extracted the blood yet, as Fex had given him a warning, and they needed to wait for the timing. He knew that Quinn was currently going through getting rid of his addiction. Fex never knew about the connection Vorden had, and never expected him to be able to get such powerful abilities. He had hoped with Quinn going through the addiction, he would be weak enough to the point where it was easier for him to be knocked out, and it seemed like it had worked. There were many times when Vorden had watched Quinn. He appeared to have been given 2 or 3 chances, as if he had more lives than one, but this time that hadn't happened. However, this also meant there was a chance that during the fight, Quinn would be close to turning into a bloodsucker. He had been informed that there should be a flask similar on Quinn's body. Vorden searched and found a replica. The next step was to wait patiently for the others to get back to him, or until there were signs that Quinn was starting to change. "We have successfully gotten Peter. We're coming up now," Logan said. Everything seemed to have fallen into place. Layla had entered the room and was now standing by Quinn's side, both of them looking at Quinn's body. "How do you think he will react when he wakes up?" Layla asked. "I think he'll be pissed, but he will understand. He will soon realize if he was in our shoes, he would have done the same thing," Borden replied, as he pulled out a small little dagger and proceeded to cut Quinn on the arm. Blood started seeping from the wound and fell into the flask. "Do you think this is right? Aren't we just sacrificing one life for another?" Layla asked. "Don't forget, Peter had already been caught by the military. There was nothing we could do. This solves both our problems. They never find out about the vampires, and for a short while, it will get the vampires off our back. 0 of 95 HP. Bloodlust is at its maximum. You are now transforming." The standard messages would appear, even though Quinn wasn't conscious. Suddenly, as the flask was filled, Quinn's body started to jolt up and down as it began to shake. Borden knew what this was straight away. He quickly handed over the flask with Quinn's blood to Layla. He then grabbed the other flask that was on Quinn's body. He held his mouth open with one hand while pouring it all in with the other. A few moments later, the shaking had stopped. The veins and muscles that were bulging had calmed down, and it looked like everything was safe for now. "Multiple blood types have been consumed. Calculating stat increases." "Here, take this as well," Borden said, handing over the second flask. "Fex said for Quinn to keep it, but I'm afraid it might only bring us more trouble in the future. Give it back to him. Don't worry about me and just go," Borden shouted. Before leaving, she took one look at Quinn. There was a good chance that his current life now would be hers. Always running away, but still. At least Quinn isn't following anyone. He chose to do things his way. With that, she ran off out of the building. "Don't wake up, Quinn," Borden said. "It's for your own good." Outside, the two boys had returned with Peter. They had given him one of the masks to wear for now, in case the other students outside would see him. Although it was pretty late now, nearly all of the students had already returned to their rooms. Layla came running out towards them as they met on the platform a little away from Military Hotel 2. She could see the three boys in their masks, and she had to admit it looked a little intimidating. The masks had a scary look to them in their designs and made them all appear like demons. "Do you have the blood?" Fex asked. "It's right here," Layla said, handing over the flask. She then quickly pulled out the second one and handed it to him as well. "Borden said he knows you mean well, but there is a chance others could come looking for it." Fex wanted to say no. He wanted Quinn to at least have something to remember him by when he left. This was a gift, but at the same time, he would be selfish otherwise if he insisted. It was true, if humans found the flask, there was a good chance he would be investigated. He took the two flasks and then grabbed Peter by the arm. "Tell Quinn he doesn't have to worry about the vampires. There are no vampires stationed at Military Base 2, nor are there any at the other military bases now. Once I leave with Peter, he will have nothing to worry about for a good while. I don't have the time to say goodbye to you all, and neither does Peter. I wish you all good luck in the future," Fex said, as he grabbed Peter and took off into the distance. A cloud of mist seemed to encase the two of them, and when the mist had settled, they no longer could be seen. Layla and Logan didn't even have the chance to even say their final words. "You know, when Fex first came, I kind of hated him, especially with everything he did to Aaron," Layla said. "But he was never a bad guy. I'm going to miss that idiot." "It will certainly feel weird without him and my assistant. Good luck to you two as well," Logan said. Before they had left Peter's room, both Fex and Borden had updated Peter on the whole situation. They informed him of the plan and the troubles that came with it. Without hesitation, after being told what needed to be done, Peter had agreed. After hearing this was all for Quinn's sake, he was happy he would be of some help to his creator and savior. However, the sudden response seemed strange, Fex thought. Sure, whites were loyal to their creators, but not like this one. One would have to command order and be forced to do so due to the bond of blood, but Peter seemed to have been so accepting over the whole thing. "I can't guarantee what will happen to you when they find out," Fex said. "You could be killed." The words spoken were trying to deter him. "It's okay," Peter replied. "Better than being left in the hands of the humans. Besides, if I stayed, there is a good chance they would find out about all of you, and I wouldn't want anything to happen." Hearing these words had put a smile on Borden's face. "Peter, you did change for the better, and I don't think it's just 'cause you're a white now," said Borden. "When you first evolved, you seemed cruel and distant, but those words right there, they didn't come from the white version of you or the old Peter. Right now I see a new man." Hearing Vorden's words just confirmed Fex's strange thoughts further. Whites were relatively short-tempered and evil. Sure, Peter had shown this a few times, but it wasn't to the degree of whites that he knew. Perhaps this was the influence of Quinn's will on the Creator. It was a shame, as it seemed to be progressing slowly. Peter started to change away from the standard white. "Let's go," Fex said. After parting ways from the others, Peter was taken to a safe, secluded place out on the platform, away from the meeting point with Silver, as well as away from the others. The masks were now returned, and right now, Peter had transformed his face to look like Quinn. If anyone were to see the two of them, they would just think they were nothing more than two students laughing. There was no chance for someone else to spot Quinn either, as Vorden was keeping an eye on him in the special training room. "Do you hate me?" Fex asked. "No," Peter replied instantly, but gave nothing more back. "I hate me," Fex said. "You know, I thought I might get attached to this place and hate to go back home. What I didn't expect was that I would get attached to the people rather than the place. I can't help but think that they all had to go through this just because of my selfish wants." "The vampires would have come for Quinn anyway," Peter replied. "What do you mean by that?" Fex asked. There was no reason to send any of the vampires to the military base. They had only come out to search for him. Peter hadn't replied because he didn't know why the vampires would come after Quinn. All he knew was before, Quinn would often say that it seemed like, for some reason, he was trying to get stronger as fast as possible, as if he was preparing for a threat ahead. "Oh, I think I know," Fex said, giving his answer and coming to his conclusion as usual. It had to be something to do with the shadow powers. There was a good chance that Quinn's master was part of the old Punishers, if they were still around. If the others knew about this, they certainly would send people after him. Even if Quinn's master wasn't a Punisher, the others would want to get their hands on Quinn's power for themselves and find out which family was in charge of Quinn. "I never did find out the truth behind him." Fex at first was very curious, but soon felt bad about trying to find details of what he would now call a friend back. It just felt wrong, and it wasn't in his nature to do things like that. "Here, take this," Fex said, as he handed the flask over to Peter. After opening the lid, Peter gulped down the whole drink in one go, and suddenly had a strange feeling in his chest. It was something he hadn't felt in a while, and it was all a little alien to him. "The sound! My heart! It's beating again!" As the blood fell down his throat and reached his heart, strange energy surged through his body. The blood was now being pumped from the heart all over the body. He could feel it moving through his veins. It felt as if his insides were on fire. For anyone else, it would be a painful experience, but for Peter, it was a joy, since it was the first time he had felt pain in a while. "What is this?" Peter asked. "It's your master's blood. Usually there would be no reason to do this to a white. Their strengths are the fact that they can't feel pain. If anything, this makes you seem more human. Anyway, don't be too happy. The effects are temporary," Fex explained. "Our powers come from our blood, and right now, Quinn's power is inside you. Right now, the feeling, the smell, and even the look. With all this, I wouldn't be able to tell who I was looking at. As in terms of power, although your attacks and such will be healthy, you still can't produce any blood attacks like we are. Also, I would urge you not to fight or test out any of your powers. At most, I see this lasting a week. Day by day, the power will slowly start to fade, and sooner or later, they will find out. If you start using that extra strength of yours, it will only go away quicker." Fex then took a deep breath as he started to walk off to one of the military bases. "Leave all the talking to me." Once again, Silver was waiting patiently on top of the roof of Building 4. In her hand was a rectangular-looking device that looked identical to the one in Logan's room. It was a portable teleporter. She had trusted that her brother would complete the task, although he was a fool. He wasn't one to break promises. When he said he would finish it, she already knew he would get it done. "You're here," she said, as two figures jumped up from the side. "Oh," Silver replied, seeing that the person she had brought with them was still fully conscious. "As you requested, this is the vampire who had made it illegal. I had been tailing him a while and explained everything had happened. When I told him that a vampire knight was here to catch him, he immediately turned himself in, knowing there was no need to fight." A vampire knight, a class that was designated just below the vampire leader. It was a unique role, as each family was able to designate only 2 vampires in their family. They would mostly be in charge of running things or giving orders if the vampire leader wasn't present. Because of this, to be able to be elected into such a position, one would need a strong power to keep the others in the line. Seeing the beautiful woman in front of him, Peter felt nothing. Yet for some reason, that seemed to worry him even more. When he had first encountered Fex, his wild energy could be felt throughout. One could tell he was strong. But with Silver it was calm. It was as if she wasn't even there, yet clearly she stood right in front of him. "And what of the illegal?" she asked. "I have taken care of him and gotten rid of the body, but since he and this one are registered students, they will soon find out about them. I suggest we leave as soon as possible." Silver walked over to Fex slowly. The sound of her boots hitting the floor was heard. Everything had been prepared for this moment, and he had answered perfectly. Now he just needed her to believe him. However, he was too afraid and didn't want to look up for even a second. Suddenly he felt a hand on his hair. Silver ruffled it up and gave it a little pat. "You have done well, little brother. I will tell the family of your good deeds here, and they shall lighten the punishment." The square portal device was placed on the ground, and a unique digital number was imputed. The contraption started to open itself up, slowly piece by piece, until it had finally connected. Fex quickly tied up Peter's hand behind his back with his string ability and pulled him along. "Goodbye, everyone," he said in his head as he stepped through the portal, with Peter following behind. Soon after, Silver threw a small circular ball on the floor and stepped through herself. The small circular ball started to blink red and made a beeping sound. The blinking along with the sound started to get faster until the ball had exploded, destroying everything in a 2-meter radius, including the portal. No one would be able to follow their traces to the vampire's home. Slowly, it seemed like Quinn was waking up. A few grunts were heard here and there as he started to lift himself off the floor. His insides were hurting, which was a strange feeling, but his body was mostly healed from the attack. When he had opened his eyes, he was greeted with several messages that had appeared while he was knocked out. 50 of 95 HP, hunger has diminished, transformation has been cancelled, multiple blood types consumed, stat points allocated, 4 free stat points remaining. Quinn quickly tried to get his head around what the messages had meant and tried to remember his last moments. Suddenly, he started to remember he was in the middle of a fight, and it was with Vorden. It hadn't lasted for long. The only thing he could guess was that he had been knocked. Transformation cancelled. I see it's all starting to make sense now. I must have been knocked out in the middle of the fight. I was low on HP in the first place and started to transform. The stat increase and the HP regained must have been from the blood in the flask. When Quinn found out he was getting addicted, he decided to stop consuming blood daily. However, he soon realized that it didn't mean he had to stop collecting blood from different students. After placing one of the students' blood in the flask, he later collected other students' blood and placed it into the container. When his HP was low enough, he would consume the flask with all the blood in it, giving him a boost in stats as well as helping him get rid of his addiction. Status, stats, strength 26, agility 27, stamina 21, charm 28. He had also obtained 4 more free stat points to be used whenever he wished. I'll continue to place it into charm for now, he thought. The reason for this was no student's blood type would directly increase the charm stat like the others. On top of this, currently, he knew of and had found no equipment that did such a thing either, while all the other stats still had the benefit of higher-tier equipment. His plan had significantly worked. As long as he had the flask, he could continue to do this without addiction to blood. He reached around his side and went to grab the flask. Right now he felt so overjoyed that he wanted to grab it and kiss it. Huh? Where's the flask? Quinn thought, as he panicky started to grab around his waist, but could find nothing. So you're finally awake, Vorden said, making sure that he was a few feet away. He didn't know how Quinn would react to the whole thing and made sure to keep his distance. Hearing the voice made Quinn spring up to his feet, and instantly he got into a fighting stance. Shadowy Wait, it's me. I was the one that gave you the blood, Quinn. Calm down. What's your name? Quinn asked. I'm Vorden. It's me, Quinn. Remember we went to the red portal planet together and you turned into that bloodsucker? If you want proof, I can even go into detail about how you ate. Stop, I believe you, Quinn said. not wanting Vorden to remind him of what had happened back then. "What happened to you, Vorden? Was it you that attacked me? Was it pure? What's going on?" Quinn asked. "Do you remember a while ago when I said if there were some things you found out about me, I would have to kill you?" Vorden replied. "At the time, it probably seemed like a joke, but I was quite serious. There are some secrets that I have, Quinn, but that's not important right now." "What do you mean it's not important right now?" Quinn shouted back. "You or Syl or whoever it was just fried my arse." "There's something you need to know. It's about Peter and Fex. I promise I'll explain everything." The trust between the two of them had been partially broken, and Vorden could see that. So he made sure to stay a few feet away from Quinn while explaining the details of what had happened and why. What Fex's part in all of this was and what his part of it was as well. Once he explained everything, there was silence between the two of them. Vorden had been prepared for a telling off, a scolding, or even sadness, but there was no reaction at all. After a few moments, Quinn started to walk towards him with his head down. Seeing this, Vorden gulped and moved to the side out of the way. However, Quinn continued to move forward until he eventually reached the door. "Quinn, aren't you going to say anything?" Vorden asked. He just couldn't stand the silence anymore. "I'm disappointed, in not just you, Vorden, but everyone. Since when could you not trust me to make my own decisions? Even worse, when did you guys start making the decisions for me?" Looking around the room, Quinn lifted his hand and swung his fist into the door as hard as he could. "Open the door!" he shouted, as he slammed his fist into the metal door again. It was sturdy since it was made out of glathrium, and even the strongest people could not do anything to the door. Quinn lifted his hand and proceeded to punch it again. This time the skin from his knuckles ripped, and there was a bloody fist mark left on the door. 49 of 95 HP. Seeing this, Vorden hurried over and entered the code at the side, allowing the doors to open. As soon as they did, Quinn continued to storm off and away. "Wait, Quinn, where are you going? You're not going to try to do anything, are you? They're already gone," Vorden said, afraid that he might go looking for them, which was pointless. "I know," said Quinn. "I can no longer feel Peter's presence. It's too far away. I just want to be alone for a bit." Sometimes one needed space and time to heal. Vorden knew this better than most, and decided to let him go for now until he had calmed down. Quinn continued to walk around the large platform in a circle. As he went by, he looked and went past each of the military hotels. He was thinking about everything that had happened until he had eventually stopped and started to look over the ledge down into the arena floor. "I can't blame them. They did what they thought was best for me and Peter. Who knows what would have happened to him? The only person I can blame for being in the situation I'm in is myself. I'm just too weak. Too weak to help Peter, too weak for Fex to even rely on me. And Fex, at first I didn't trust him, but it seemed like he did keep his word till the end. He didn't give me up to the vampires, and everything he did was to protect me. System, do you know what will happen to Fex and Peter once they find out Peter's real identity?" Quinn asked. "Honestly, I'm not too sure. It seems like a lot of time has passed, and as the world changes, so do the rules. Although vampires usually stay relatively close to tradition. A trial will be placed where the council shall decide their fate. If you want me to be really honest with you, they will kill Peter. They will assume he is something called an illegal, since he won't be in their files. What they don't know is that Peter is not illegal." "What do you mean by that?" "Fex said that a vampire that wasn't created by one of the 13 leaders, or at least didn't have their permission, would be considered an illegal, correct?" "Yes, but don't you remember when you created your own family? Peter is part of the cursed family. Do you also remember when I told you to keep this a secret from other vampires no matter what? Well, I suppose it's time it told you the truth. Quinn, when you created that family, you became one of the 13 leaders. Your family name has taken over the missing 10th seat," the system explained. "Wait, does that mean if I tell them who I am, about the family, then Peter will live and Fex won't get in trouble?" Quinn asked. "No," the system replied instantly. "Think about it. Why do you think the 10th family seat was empty in the first place? I can't stop your destined fate in the future, Quinn, but I can delay it. You inform them of who you are now, and you will become a target in an instant." "Then explain to me. Explain what happened," Quinn shouted in his mind. "Could you explain to me who you are, and explain to me what happened to the 10th family, and don't give me this crap that you can't tell me." Quinn already had some ideas and guesses of his own who the system was, as slowly everything was starting to be revealed. However, there was no point in overthinking it until he could confirm his guesses. "I'm afraid I cannot tell." "You're useless," Quinn said as he continued to storm off back to his hotel room. Inside the Military Base 1 hotel, on one of the top floors, an urgent knock was heard at one of the Big Four's doors. "Sir, please answer immediately. We have a report from Duke," a man said, desperately trying to get into the room. Jack immediately answered the door after hearing Duke's name. If it was something in the middle of the night, it couldn't have been good news. "What is it?" Jack asked. "It's about the student Peter. He's missing." Inside an elegant large room with a modern-looking design, Jack was sitting there, patiently tapping away at a desk in the corner. Standing by his side were two reasonably large guards. He always had someone by his side no matter what, due to his unique situation. He wasn't like the other Big Four family members, for they believed in their strength. He knew the others looked down on him because of this, but he didn't care. The two guards who stood by his side weren't the same pair as the time when he had visited the military base. After their mistakes, he decided to give them another role and replace them. Jack very rarely gives people second chances. If one was to mess up, he could always take their power away before giving it to another. The tapping continued, and the guards were now looking at Jack out of the corner of their eye as it seemed to be getting louder and louder. He shouted as he slammed his fist on the desk. "It has to be pure. Once again, they got the upper hand and managed to get rid of him somehow, and there isn't much I can do," Jack said. For this one, Jack was on his own. He hadn't informed Oscar or any of the other military personnel about Peter, how he was most likely a suspect of pure. This was because he wanted to do everything himself. The only person who had been helping him along the way was General Duke. Duke was always the one who assigned two guards to be kept on Peter and decided who he would go up against and the ref while the others knew nothing. He couldn't ask for their help, and he couldn't start turning this place upside down, trying to look for an insider. Otherwise, they would find out. They would then question Jack's motives and put all the blame on him. Although he was in a position where it wouldn't be too much of a problem, he still just didn't want to deal with it. The others didn't like him in the first place. He knew that the other three regretted ever inviting him into the Big Four. The only reason why he was able to stay in his position of power was due to his great relationship with the military and Oscar. There was a good chance what he had tried to do would sour that relationship, and the others would use this opportunity to break it. The worst part about this whole mess was that now he had to make sure the others and the military wouldn't find out about it. He was the one that now needed to cover up his tracks. It was decided. A report was sent out to Duke with further instructions. Peter would no longer be taking part in the tournament due to an emergency matter. What emergency matter, he would let him decide. When they returned to the military base, he would let Duke handle the rest. The disappearance of one student shouldn't be too hard to do in his position. An attempted runaway? There were many different options they could put Peter's disappearance as. "Pure, I promise if I ever find out where your base is, I'll send my whole army after you and crush you," he said, squeezing his fist tightly. The next day had arrived, and it was now morning. The events were not set for some time yet, and the main events were later. That's why Quinn found it very odd when he had a knock, bright early in the morning. Before even opening the door, though, he knew who it was. He paused for a second and then braced himself before opening it. "Vorden, why are you here so early? The events don't start later," Quinn said, trying to make things seem familiar between them, but it was clear that it wasn't. "Am I allowed in?" Vorden asked. "Come on, don't be like that. Please. The more you act differently, the more you will remind me of the crap you pulled," Quinn said. Once inside the room, Vorden walked and headed for the outside window. The bright light beamed on his golden hair and handsome face. Looking at him now, the sadness in his eyes made him look like an abandoned prince. "I wanted to tell you about yesterday before you go asking. You're right, it's not fair that I keep all my secrets while I know all of yours." Quinn himself was now feeling a little guilty since he hadn't told the others everything, but it wasn't like it was a big deal to explain to them how his powers worked, how it was a game like a system. Even if he did tell them, it wouldn't have changed anything. "How much do you remember before you were knocked out?" Vorden asked. "You mean when you were screaming that your name wasn't Vorden and you were Syl? Or when you nearly roasted me like a chicken before, then zapping me?" Quinn replied. "Well, it looks like you remember everything then," said Vorden. "Like I said, yesterday that was me. There was no mind control or anything. Syl and I are the same." "Vorden, you're going to have to be clearer than that." "I really can't go into details, but have you ever heard of DID?" Quinn paused for a second as he thought about it. The strange actions, the fluctuation in voice, it indeed was like he was a different person. Suddenly a memory came back to him. There was one time he had met Syl before, when he was being questioned. Quinn always wondered how Vorden had gotten away with the lying test back then. He thought he had borrowed a mind swap ability at the time, but what if that wasn't the case at all? "You mean you have split personalities?" Quinn said, shocked. He had heard of things like this before, but had never seen anything like this in person. He also never realized how separate these personalities were. He always thought if he was to meet someone with did, it would be similar to a person who had mood swings. But the way Vorden had acted was almost like two people were living inside one body. "I can't go into many details about how or why, not yet anyway, but I will tell you one thing. I can copy only one ability. In comparison, the other one can copy 3. That's why I needed to switch with him yesterday when fighting you," Vorden explained. Purposely, Vorden avoided telling Quinn about Rayton. Having to tell someone this was hard enough, and he wasn't able to go into details about the whole thing anyway. So for now, he would keep it as simple as possible. "Vorden, why didn't you tell us this? I told you about me being a vampire, right? If you told me, or even the others, we would have understood. Do you know why I'm telling you this, Quinn? Because I want to regain your trust. You trusted me, and now I'm trusting you." Vorden then held out his hand. When looking at it, it reminded Quinn of the first day the two of them had met. He was the only one that reached out to him. Ever since then, the two of them had been through all out. Then he remembered something else. The 3 of them had gone through a lot. There was also Peter. "I trust you, Vorden," Quinn said, shaking his hand. "But that doesn't mean I don't think you make stupid decisions. So do I get to meet this guy at some point? Maybe we can be friends?" Vorden laughed, but chose not to say anything back. If Syl had heard this, he would have been running out from his corner and had taken over the seat in an instant. When he approached Quinn back then, when they had first met, he did so because he was a level 1. Often low levels looked at the world differently due to how they were treated, but after Syl had gained an interest, it meant now his life would revolve around Quinn. However, Vorden was happy that Syl had taken an interest in Quinn. He felt like the two of them were no real friends. "I also came here for something else as well," said Vorden. "I was hoping to come here before they did, and it looks like I beat them." "They?" Quinn replied, slightly confused. "Did you forget? Now that Peter isn't there, that means the substitute will have to take his place. They should be here soon to take you underground," Vorden explained. "Oh, I completely forgot about it. I never thought this would even happen. Oh well," he said, shrugging his shoulders. "I guess I'll just lose the match." "Do you want to do that, Quinn?" "What do you mean? I have to." "I'm asking you again. Do you want to lose the match?" Of course, Quinn didn't. For the longest time, ever since he had gotten his powers, he wanted to show all those people who thought he was weak, all those people that bullied him, what he could do. And more than ever, he tried to beat whatever net True Dream had set up for Quinn. All this mess in the first place was because of him and his sick ways. "We can fight," said Vorden. "On the Red Portal planet we came up with a plan, remember? If they discover your powers, then I would tell them that my family was backing you. We can use that today." Before Fex left, he said something. He told us that he and the one who came to get him were the only vampires on the military bases, that there were no others. At the time, I was wondering why he needed to tell us that. It is always better to be careful just in case, right? But I think he knew what was going to happen once Peter was taken. He was telling you to go crazy, not to worry. With Vorden using his original family name, they would no longer be after Quinn for the ability book. They would assume it was with Vorden's family. The other problem was the vampires. Even if they weren't here, there was always the chance they would find out about him. But did that matter anymore? It was only a matter of time before they found out about Peter, which would eventually lead them back to Quinn. "If you're ready," said Vorden, "then I am as well." "I don't want to hide anymore," Quinn replied. Before leaving Quinn on his own, Vorden had a few last words to say to him. Hearing these words, he knew what to do and was confident. Right after Vorden had left, he was on his own in his room. His heart, although beating slowly, was beating loud and strong. A new rising energy was felt surging through his whole body. "I wonder why I'm so excited." While being left on his own, he had time to reflect on everything and everyone that he had met so far. After finding that book and coming to the military school, he had a crazy journey he had never expected. More than anything, he didn't think there would be others who would join him along the way. A genius hacker, a terrorist or double agent, a vampire and an undead. Then you have the Ice Queen, and finally, The only one who I thought was normal turns out to have a split personality, Quinn thought. I guess these were the only friends I could make. What they say is true. Crazy people attract other crazy people. Yesterday night, while on his walk, Quinn had regained all of his health points. As long as he wasn't hungry and needed blood, his body would naturally regenerate on its own. But if it did, it would also make it so he was hungrier sooner. This made it hard for him to tell how practical the single session of restraining himself was. From the way Fex described it, as long as he wasn't drinking blood daily, it shouldn't cause much change. He didn't know how much he managed to wear off the blood addiction, but from now on, he knew he had to be careful. With no blood flask, it would be a while until he could start consuming the blood of students again. Then suddenly a thought came to his head. He quickly opened up the system shop and continued to scroll through the options. "That's it, there it is," Quinn said. The flask had been in the shop all along. At the time, he never thought such a thing would have been useful since he had the blood bank and Layla, but now it seemed like a handy item indeed. But looking at the ingredients needed, he was quickly disappointed. They were 2 intermediate-level beasts as well as an advanced tier one. For such a small item, it needed quite a few things. The problem was that they weren't items commonly found in the marketplace. Quinn would either have to hunt for it himself, which was near impossible, or hire someone else to get it for him. However, now that he knew it was possible to make one of his own, he would keep it in mind. Maybe when he earned enough credits in the future, he would be able to start making items from the shop. Once again, a knock was heard on his door. It was still early morning, but he had been expecting this. Not knowing who the smell was coming from meant it was them. After opening the door, 3 soldiers dressed in slick black uniforms stood there, tall and strong. "Quinn Talon, correct?" "Yes, sir." "An emergency matter involving Peter Chuck has caused him to drop out of the tournament. Due to this, the substitute for Dell's class, Quinn Talon, must participate. Please follow us." After a quick elevator ride down, they had finally arrived at the underground area. Unlike above, the students here were already awake and were practicing for the events. Still, many of them had nerves as it was only the second day. Before being able to join them, Quinn was further taken to a separate area where a desk and what looked like a small office area had been set up. Behind the desk, equipment was there for participants to use, as well as other things such as snacks and beverages. There were also many soldiers standing on guard, keeping an eye on everyone. The tension was high between the participants, and this often caused things to heat up between them. The soldiers didn't mind a bit of back and forth between students, but the second there was fighting, they would stop it. Fights were to be displayed in the arena, not down below where nobody could see. The reason for bringing Quinn to the desk was that he needed to be registered. They handed him over a tablet where he was to input his fighting name. "Oh, crap, I didn't even think of this. I can't use my gamer ID, as Peter did. Even if I'm using my shadow powers, I won't be using my blood powers." He struggled to come up with a name, but finally managed to put one down. The man at the desk looked at the tablet and chuckled before handing it over to one of the other soldiers. "You're free to use the trading area as you wish. You will be called later on in the day, and your room number, if you want to rest, is 23, or if you manage to make it through." The man then paused for a second. He looked at Quinn's wristwatch and realized that it said level 1. He shook his head in disbelief, not understanding what this class was thinking. Sure, the last student was a level 1, but they were clearly a special case, and the others could even see that due to the guards always being around them. "Don't worry about it and do what you want until we call you," the man said as he wafted his hand, suggesting Quinn go away. Was my name that bad? Is that why he was laughing? Quinn thought. Looking around, there wasn't much for him to do. Since the first round of fights had already been completed, the others knew what powers they had. This meant that the training hall was full of people using their powers. They would still keep their moves hidden, but they were able to practice a lot better than before. But for Quinn, he still wanted to keep his powers hidden until the fight. Instead of fighting himself, he decided to lean up against the wall and keep an eye out on all the others. One of these in the room would be fighting. He had been there for a good 5 minutes, and when leaning up against the wall, another person jumped in to join him, one that was quite large and had a square-looking head. The two said nothing to each other as they looked at all the participants. The person who was also up against the wall was Nate. The whole night, Sam had been excited after finding out that Zombie P would be in the fighting event. It was a shame that the Blood Evolver didn't turn out to be Larry, but he was excited to fight Zombie P. However, as soon as he entered the room, he looked and looked, but couldn't see Peter anywhere. He stood out more than the others, and he wasn't the only one that had noticed this. Peter was now well known to everyone. He was the kid who always had 2 guards beside him, and it also turned out he had an amazing regenerative ability. For him to suddenly disappear, they all could tell straight away. Noticing this, Nate knew that there had to be a replacement. He decided to look from the wall at all the participants taking part, in order to get a better look at everyone. From the first day, he kept an eye on everyone as he went about looking for Larry. There were far few people today, but still, he couldn't see anyone new practicing. Where's the replacement? Suddenly, a large slash of air came out of nowhere. It was hard to see, but one could feel it if one's senses were sharp enough. Nate, noticing this, turned to his side as he moved. At the same moment, he saw another student that had been on the wall with him the whole time. "Hey, move!" Nate shouted. But Quinn didn't listen. He too could sense the wind, and instead decided to stay still. He knew that the attack wasn't going to hit him. The attack slammed into the wall, making a small bang as it hit, like the end of a whip. However, there was no marking on the wall, for it was made of glathrium. "Oh, sorry, that almost hit you. Are you okay?" a student said, running over. "Be careful next time!" Nate shouted back. "How stupid and bad could you be? This room is massive, and you managed to make a stray attack come over here." He was annoyed. The student continued to apologize, but a few others behind him were also looking over. "It was no accident," Quinn mumbled, as he finally left the wall and started to walk over towards the student. He had overheard the student speaking the whole time. They could see that Nate and Quinn were standing there by the wall and wanted to give them a little scare. When the attack came towards Quinn, he knew that they had aimed precisely in the middle of the 2 of them, and there was no need for him to move. All they wanted to do was scare them. After all, if he or Nate were hurt, the students would have gotten into trouble. Looking over in the student's direction from where the attack had come from, he could also see a bunch of girls off to the side, and something clicked in his head. It wasn't an accident. If I know thirsty boys, those guys were trying to impress those girls. As Nate saw the curly-haired student walk towards the boy, he was wondering what was going to happen. "Wait, is that the new guy? It has to be. I don't remember seeing him down here." Looking at his wristwatch, he could see the level 1, but something else had worried him even more. He could see the student clenching his fist, ready for a punch. Back on the top platform, the students were starting to gather in front of the screens for the first events to start. The others had left the hotel together and were now peacefully sitting in front of Screen 2. Just then, Sam had arrived from his hotel, as he had agreed to meet up with them yesterday. "Hey, where's Quinn?" Sam asked, noticing he wasn't sitting down with them. "Well," Vorden replied, "he's taking part in the fighting tournament." The drink Sam held nearly dropped to the floor, but he quickly tightened his grip, and then a small smile appeared on his face. "Oh. I don't know why fate has decided to put you on the battlefield. All I know is everyone might be in for one hell of a surprise," Sam thought. Quinn leaned against the wall while looking at the students, with several thoughts bombarding his head. The energy from before and his strong heartbeat hadn't settled down. Every second meant the fight he was about to participate in was getting closer and closer. This whole event reminded him of the past, life before the book, how he was too weak before. He was too weak to help Peter. He was too weak to help himself. How the other students used to beat him every day, and the most he could do was get a hit here or there. He was thinking about how much he hated his life back then every single day, how the school chose to do nothing because he wasn't destined for great things, and again, when arriving at the military base, how they started to target those around him. All these bad memories were making him angrier. At that moment, when he was walking, the picture of him getting hit and beaten by these losers was playing in his head. Hearing the students behind him laughing and saying what they had said, he already had enough of this. He couldn't do anything back then, but he could now. Seeing Quinn's fist tightening, Nate could tell that was about to happen straight away. Although the kids deserved to get hit, Nate didn't want the new student to be punished for it. He would be the aggressor in this situation if his punch landed. However, there was also a second reason Nate wanted to stop a fight. The people he was walking to were level 7s. There weren't many weak people left in the fighting event. If a fight was to happen, He couldn't see Quinn coming out of it unharmed. "Hey, is he coming over to us?" "What does he think he's doing?" one of the students from behind said. The student in front was also annoyed. Although he had thrown out the wind strike, he was only trying to have a little fun. He knew the attack wouldn't hit them, so he felt like there was no reason for anyone to get angry. "What the hell, you brat? What are you getting so annoyed about when I already said I was sorry?" the student complained. "I'm in no mood for games. Out of all the days to try to pull this, today is not that day," Quinn said. "Of course it's my fault, right? It's always the fault of the weak ones for being born this way." The sound of Quinn's voice, he wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but there was certainly some type of undertone when he was speaking. The student looked around to see if his friends behind him had heard, or if it was just him. They continued to laugh and joke around, and even gave a thumbs up towards him. "They didn't hear that? Am I going crazy?" the student thought. Out of panic and desperation, he threw a wind slash. Quickly, Quinn moved his body to the side and started walking forward again. To the student in front of him, it looked like the attack had just gone right through his body. Now the student was starting to feel his palms sweat. He threw out another attack, and once again, ever so slightly, Quinn would place his foot, allowing him to avoid the attack and go back into position. The movement was so small it could hardly be seen. The outsiders who were watching such a thing were confused. All they could see was one student walking forward, while the other was walking back in the middle of the room. The student who was throwing out the wind blades was using a unique technique. When wind users use such an attack, usually a thin white line can be seen striking the air. But the wind user's attack was invisible to the eye and could only be felt. "What's Josh doing?" the student said. "Is he pretending to attack? I knew he was too soft. He thinks he can bluff his way out." However, a few moments later, a large whip-like sound could be heard as the wind attacks reached the end of how far they could go. The loud banging noise was continuously heard, and now the others were in shock. Josh wasn't moving his hands about. He was throwing out attacks. The loud noise had managed to attract the attention of the small pop-up office from earlier. "What is going on over there?" the man at the desk said, scratching his head. As he looked over, he could see the new student. "I thought something like this might happen. Stop this before it gets out of hand," the man ordered. A soldier from the post was immediately on his way. Seeing the soldier come over, Nate breathed a sigh of relief. He was hesitating whether to get involved or not, but was afraid he could have been hurt by the wind users. It wasn't easy to sense those attacks. Nate believed that the student had thrown out those attacks and had missed on purpose, trying to scare the student away. The two were now close enough, and Quinn dashed forward. Josh lifted his hand, ready to throw another wind strike right at the student. The soldier who was on his way could see this. If that attack hits, the other might be seriously hurt, the soldier thought, and he too had dashed forward. What they didn't expect was what Quinn did next. He lifted his leg fast up towards his head and then slammed it down, performing an axe kick right on the student's wrist. Josh's hand slammed down and was pinned against the floor. Josh tried to move, but even using his whole strength, he couldn't budge. If he tried any harder, he was afraid his wrist would break if it wasn't already broken. After the axe kick had been performed, Quinn threw out his fist. There was no hammer strike. There was no blood spray. It was just an ordinary punch, but it did contain his full strength behind it. As the punch went forward, a man stood in the way and braced himself, holding both his arms in a cross shape. "That's it? Just a little weak punch?" The students around started to laugh. The blow had hit the man, but he remained there solid and still, not having moved an inch, and the expression on his face hadn't changed at all. "Come on, Josh, you could have taken the punch and hit him back." The students continued to mock their friend. "Stop this at once," the man said. "Fighting is reserved for the arena and not underground. If you continue, then you shall be punished." When Quinn looked at who he had hit, he noticed it was one of the soldiers. He then peeked around the soldier to see the student behind him, grabbing his wrist. It looked like it was starting to swell. "It's okay, I think he learned his lesson," Quinn said as he walked off. "Wait!" the soldier shouted. "Young boy, who's your teacher?" "You mean Dell?" Quinn replied. "No, not your homeroom teacher. That kick. You're in the beast weapons class, yes?" "My teacher is Sergeant Leo," Quinn replied as he walked off. The soldier said no more and allowed Quinn to walk away. "Wait, you're going to let him go?" Josh cried. "Look at my wrist. I think he broke it." Stop your complaining. Something like this can easily be fixed by the doctors before your event, and don't think I didn't see where you had planned to use your strike. In my eyes, this was a simple act of self-defense." The soldier's decision was final, and Josh could see that. There was no more use in complaining, and he wouldn't try bothering Quinn again. After the fight had been broken up, Quinn went back to the wall to relax once again. Nate came rushing over with a glow in his eyes. He had seen something quite impressive. "Hey, that kick was impressive. You must have practiced a lot to get it that smooth and fast." Nate was a junkie for martial arts. Even before learning what type of ability he had, he preferred the pure skill people would use in hand-to-hand combat. The fact that it also helped him out with his ability was only a bonus. "If you want, maybe we can spar sometime?" Nate asked, then looked down at his watch, which made him add a few last words. "Without abilities, of course." Quinn could see that the student was a nice person. He didn't look threatening at all, even if he did seem a bit annoying. "Sure, it sounds fun." Back at the pop-up office, the soldier had returned to make a report of the events that had occurred. "Anything to report?" the man at the desk asked. "A broken wrist, nothing else. They won't fight again, I'm sure of it." The man at the desk paused for a second as he looked at the soldier before speaking again. "Go back to your duties. You're dismissed. Oh, and before you go, make sure to see a doctor about your broken arm." "Yes, sir," the soldier said as he rushed off. "This is an announcement. All students get into their designated groups. The main events will begin shortly."
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.